headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight and the following morning 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show. We're on GB News, broadcasting live from the halls of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, as the search for missing British tech tycoon Mike Lynch enters its second day, we'll be live from the Sicilian coast, where investigators are desperately searching for survivors and trying to piece together exactly what happened to the billionaire's super yacht. And King Charles received a warm welcome in Southport as he arrived to meet survivors of the attack in which 3 young girls were killed. Now, before the general election, the Labour Party promised we'd save £300 a year on our energy bills. Well, today, we're told that they'll go up by £150. They also promised to get Britain working, but today they want to enshrine the right to work from home in law. Confused? Well, I'll help you try and get them make the sense of that with our political editor, Chris Hope. Next up is the Reform Party launching a town hall takeover of councils ahead of the local elections next May. Well, I put that question to Reform's Lee Anderson, who yesterday dramatically scooped up 3 independent councillors in Gwent, Wales. Later in the show, I'll be joined by the head of that council, the New Reformers. And is it time for a queer Sheriff of Nottingham? Well, woke directors of the BBC have made the Sheriff of Nottingham young, female and queer in the new series of Shield. Men in tights, I can take. But do we really need a gay, gender-fluid sheriff? Well, the show, always a pleasure to have your company. So, is Reform planning a town hall takeover quietly? Well, yesterday Lee Anderson went to Wales and 3 independents signed up the nucleus of a new movement in Wales. Could that be a template for the rest of Britain? Lee will join me in about an hour's time. He's also raging about the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in the wake of those riots that saw over 1,100 arrested. He sent a spicy letter to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, accusing the Home Office possibly of contempt of court. You would not want to miss that. It's going to be explosive stuff. Get in touch with your thoughts the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But now your headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon. It's just after 2 minutes past 3. The main news from the GB News Centre. King Charles has visited Southport today to meet survivors of last month's stabbing attack in the town, which left 3 girls dead and others injured. His Majesty also took time to meet members of the public who showed up to the visit. Earlier, he spoke to some from the community who provided support in the aftermath of the attack. And he also thanked emergency service personnel who dealt with both the stabbings and the riots that followed. Rescue efforts are continuing for 6 people missing at sea after a British-flagged super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily. Among those unaccounted for is British businessman Mike Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter Hannah. We now know Morgan Stanley banking chairman Jonathan Bloomer and senior lawyer Chris Morvillo are also missing, along with their wives. 15 people, including the wife of Mike Lynch, were rescued after the vessel capsized during intense storms yesterday. Well, Marco Tillota from the Palmero Diving Unit told reporters that dive teams are encountering significant challenges in their attempts to access the wreck.
The difficulties of the case are dictated by the depth that does not allow for long working times. So you understand well that the conditions of the hull are tilted 90 degrees. Access to the hull is difficult. If you manage to get inside the hull, you understand well that inside there is a world of objects. So penetrating inside and descending into the compartment below from the stairs that are narrow and going into all the cabins is a really hard and difficult job.
Meanwhile, it's been confirmed that British businessman who stood trial in the US alongside missing tycoon Mike Lynch has died after being hit by a car. Stephen Chamberlain was killed while out running in Cambridgeshire on Saturday. Both men had recently been acquitted of fraud in the US federal court relating to the sale of their company's software to software giant Hewlett-Packard for £8.6 billion. Joe Biden became emotional as he delivered what's widely seen as his farewell speech to the Democratic National Convention. The US president wiped away tears as he addressed crowds on the first day of the event in Chicago. Kamala Harris will be formally declared as the party's election candidate later this week. Mr. Biden says she's the right choice for America.
Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an airstrike on a school in Gaza, which Israel claims Hamas was using as a command centre. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who were captured on the 7th of October during the attacks. It comes as the US, Egypt and Qatar are calling on Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposal after it gained the backing of Israel last night. America's top diplomat, Antony Blinken, says it's a decisive moment. RMT boss Mick Lynch says all pay offers will be considered by the union as he left talks at the Department of Transport. The union boss says workers expect the same terms as those offered to ASLEF train drivers, which was a 15% three-year backdated pay rise. Even then, their members working for LNER are threatening to strike over working agreements. A group of migrants were heard banging and screaming for help, concealed in a refrigerated van as they were slowly starved of oxygen, a court has heard. Anas al-Mustafa is on trial for allegedly smuggling the 7 people from France to the UK via a ferry, hiding them in a cramped fake compartment. Crew members on the ship used an axe to free the migrants after hearing their pleas for help. 2 of the migrants lost consciousness before being rescued, and an Australian nurse on board helped provide oxygen. Al-Mustafa has denied the charges and the trial continues at Lewes Crown Court. Police say they're treating a stabbing in Manchester, which left a woman dead, as a domestic incident. A 17-year-old girl and a man aged 64 are in hospital with life-threatening injuries, while 43-year-old Alberta Albingham died of her injuries. A 22-year-old man is in custody after police were called to an address in Gorton on Sunday night. The number of drug-related deaths in Scotland increased by 12% last year. Figures released show 1,172 people died, reversing a trend of improvements seen since the peak in 2020. The National Records of Scotland found the country continues to have the highest rate of drug deaths in Europe. And young people suspended from secondary school are twice as likely to be out of education, university or employment compared to their peers. A new report by Education Policy Institute found those suspended just once are more likely to experience poor outcomes between the ages of 19 and 24. Government figures show the numbers in England has reached a record high, with almost 787,000 pupils suspended in 2022-23 academic year. Well, those are the latest headlines for the moment. I'm back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Mark White. Now, divers have entered the sunken super yacht as the hunt continues for the missing passengers, with experts dubbing the operation now very complicated. British tech tycoon Mike Lynch and his daughter are among 6 tourists still missing after a luxury yacht sank in a tornado off the coast of Sicily. Well, GBNews reporter Adam Cherry is on the scene. Adam, welcome to the show. So as the search now enters its second desperate day, Adam, it's looking less like a rescue mission now and more of a recovery mission. What's the latest?
Well, unfortunately, that appears to be the case, Martin. A spokesperson for the Italian fire service in the last couple of hours saying essentially that, which is that given how quickly this vessel sank and given the circumstances, the size of the ship, and the fact that it was early in the morning, so everyone would have been in their cabins, now it's looking more, as you say, like a recovery mission, unfortunately. Now, it's not everyone saying that. There are a couple of engineers saying, actually, there might be a couple of air pockets larger than you might expect because this vessel is so big. And actually, we're entering a 24-hour period that is crucial, and now is not the time to give up. Now, they are not giving up. They are still continuing the search. In the last hour, we've seen the helicopter, which is parked just behind me here, take off and do another scan of the area, and we still have boats in the water. So not giving up, but time's of the essence, obviously, given we're now 36 hours into this rescue operation. 15 people have been rescued, a few of which have now been discharged from hospital, at least 3 of those. So there is some good news here. But as we say, this is a very delicate situation.
And Adam, we just heard there a moment ago from a local dive operator who's in charge of this mission. He said there's a very narrow window, an opportunity to get through. And of course, 50 metres down, lots of technical issues, lots of debris, lots of strong currents still. So all the time, Adam Cherry, the clock is ticking on any chances of survival.
Yeah, and they can only spend about 12 minutes underwater before having to resurface, so that's why it's difficult. The debris and the fact that most of the hull is intact makes this very tricky. The angle at which it's resting on the seabed, all of that is compounding to make this really, really difficult, even though it's not particularly far from the shore. That's the cruel part of this.
Okay, Adam Cherry, thank you for that update. And we'll cross back to you, of course, throughout the show as we get more information. Now, moving on, the Democratic National Convention has kicked off in Chicago, and Vice President Kamala Harris surprised crowds with an earlier than expected appearance as she thanked President Joe Biden for his leadership.
I want to kick us off by celebrating our incredible President Joe Biden, who will be speaking later tonight. Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you.
Well, President Joe Biden himself wiped away tears before calling Donald Trump graciously a loser and fully endorsing Kamala Harris's campaign.
Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
So that was last night. What can we expect looking ahead to tonight? Well, let's cross over to Washington, D.C. now and talk to our US correspondent, Steve Edgington. Steve, always a pleasure to have you on the show. So the torch was passed. Luckily, not a real torch. Joe Biden might have dropped it, but he was not very gracious on his way out. He was taking a lot of swipes at Donald Trump, a lot of tears on his exit. What can we expect tonight? Are we expecting Kamala Harris to be anointed by the political dynasties of the Obamas and the Clintons? Tell us more.
We can expect Barack Obama to give a major speech. He is, of course, a huge figure in the world of Democratic politics. Later, we'll also be seeing from Bill Clinton, the former Democratic president. And of course, on Thursday, Kamala Harris will make her acceptance speech for the nomination, and she will try and set out on the national stage what her plan is when she becomes president, if she is elected in November. We've seen already from President Joe Biden last night, they put him at 11 p.m. on a Monday, quite a dead slot. You get the sense the Democrats don't really want you to think about Joe Biden too much, about his presidency, about the fact that they have replaced him as their candidate without any kind of democratic election, as they normally would do, using the primaries. And Kamala Harris, she also gave a little speech last night praising Joe Biden and his work as president. We also saw from Hillary Clinton, who was making attacks on Donald Trump, and you had the crowd at the DNC chanting, "Lock him up, lock him up." In Joe Biden's speech, he even referred to Donald Trump's language towards white nationalists. He claimed that Trump said there were very good people or very fine people on both sides of a white nationalist rally in 2018. When in fact, President Trump at the time explicitly said that he wasn't talking about white nationalists or neo-Nazis. So Joe Biden has come under a bit of flack for his speech. It was a very emotive speech, a very angry speech, a very bitter speech aimed at Donald Trump. And as I said, many Americans last night will have simply been asleep. It was 11 p.m. on the Eastern Coast whilst he was giving this speech. So you get the idea, you get the sense that the Democrats really want to put Joe Biden behind them, and they really want you to focus on their new candidate, Kamala Harris, for the presidency.
It's interesting, isn't it, how, well, for starters, well done to Joe Biden for staying awake at 11 o'clock. Many people thought he wouldn't have been able to manage that, Steve. But isn't it interesting how the Democrat Party, the Democratic Party, haven't had any form of democratic election? Kamala Harris has just been anointed. It's been a coronation. There's been no votes passed. Is there a feeling here that the Democrat Party, Steve, are so determined to beat Donald Trump, they'll get somebody out of the bungu? Let's face it, hasn't even been in front of the cameras for months and months until very recently, and now the best thing since sliced bread, Saint Kamala.
There doesn't seem to be too much dissatisfaction in the Democratic Party over the fact that they have had no democratic process in this selection of their candidate. 14 million Democratic voters voted for Joe Biden to be their candidate in the primaries held earlier this year. Not one person voted for Kamala Harris to be the Democratic candidate on the ticket in November. So at the same time, the Democrats don't seem to be making terrible comments about this. They've united behind Kamala. You're seeing a breadth of these major Democratic figures coming out of the DNC and endorsing Kamala. You had AOC, a very left-wing congresswoman, making a speech yesterday as well. So I think that there seems to be a real unity around Kamala Harris. And you're right, they're trying to reshape the narrative around her. She was a very unpopular vice president. People saw her as inauthentic. She was appointed as the so-called border czar by Biden. And under Biden and Harris, the southern border in America has been uncontrolled. There's been millions of illegal migrants coming into the United States. So her record as vice president, I think, is shaky. And the media and the Democrats are really trying to reshape who Kamala Harris is to the American people.
OK, Steve Edgerton, we'll cut back to you, of course, throughout the build-up to that conference this evening. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, the King has visited Southport to pay his respects to the victims of the recent knife attacks and killings there. We'll be live with all the reaction to that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Michael found the recipe for success without going to university. Instead, he went looking for answers inside of a kitchen. The 22-year-old has just finished a level 2 course in professional cookery at UCB, a college in Birmingham.
When I started UCB, I was expecting to be so intense from day one, but it's not. It sort of builds up, so to the point where you get comfortable. And building that comfort is a huge part of becoming a chef, because you need to be comfortable being in your own skin.
This week, tens of thousands of students get their A-level results. The college wants them to remember university isn't the only option after school, and West Midlands Mayor Richard Parker agrees.
University is the right route for lots of our young people, but there are other pathways to getting access to qualifications that will give young people the skills they need to succeed in life.
Further education principal Rosa Wells says apprenticeships and technical courses are also great routes to a career.
Here at University College Birmingham, we offer vocational courses. These are hands-on technical courses that can give people a different opportunity, something different to school. So we've got brilliant facilities that really give students industry standard training.
A skills shortage across the UK means youngsters learning trades are desperately needed. 36% of job vacancies are due to shortages. The Labour government's new body, Skills England, has been created to bring training providers and businesses together with local and national authorities plus unions to target trade gaps and regional requirements. Michael's now finishing his qualification. Where he goes next is down to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:21. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. King Charles received a very warm welcome in Southport early today as he arrived to meet survivors of the attack in which 3 girls were tragically killed, stabbed to death. And joining me now is GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, welcome to the show. I saw the pictures earlier on of the King arriving in Southport. Got a very, very warm welcome. Talk us through what happened.
It certainly was a warm welcome, Martin, and in fact the King spent a lot longer here than I think he was actually scheduled to, and of course it was kept very much a secret until this morning. King Charles cutting short his holiday to come down here to Southport from Balmoral to show his continued support for the communities here following that horrific incident on the 29th of July, just over 3 weeks ago. Since then, he's been asked to be given daily updates on the evolving situation. First, of course, the initial aftermath, but then the riots, which were sparks starting here in Southport and then spreading out across the country as well. So he really wanted to spend time with the local communities here. He was inside the town hall for a private meeting with some of the survivors, the children and the families of those who were inside that Taylor Swift-themed dance class where 3 young girls tragically lost their lives. And following that private meeting, the King came outside here and met members of the public. There were some official members of the public, if that's for want of a better phrase, who had perhaps gone the extra mile looking after the local community in the aftermath of that attack. There was one man who's it was to look after and maintain this sea of flowers, which you probably see behind me, which still remains here just after, more than 3 weeks on from that attack. The King made an unscheduled stop here, actually. He went to view some of these flowers and some of the messages left here for the victims, as well as an ice cream parlour who had been giving out free ice cream to the children and members of the local community, trying to bring the community together in the aftermath of these the horrific attack and indeed the riots. And he also spent time speaking to members of the public who were gathered as well, hundreds of them. Bearing in mind this wasn't a scheduled visit, it was very much a surprise. Members of the community came out to spend time with the King and see the King. And then His Majesty went on to the local fire station where he met first responders from the fire service, ambulance service and police service who responded to the various incidents here in Southport, the attack and indeed the riots. But something that was particularly important for King Charles was meeting faith leaders as well. Part of his life's work really is community cohesion and getting different faiths to speak to each other. And we saw violent disorder, didn't we, outside of the mosque here in Southport just a couple of days after those attacks, which left 3 young girls dead. So the King spent time with them as well. And tomorrow the King will be back in London and he is expected to meet the bereaved families of BB King, Elsie Stackham and Alice de Silva Aguirre, who tragically lost their lives. The King spending time with them in private. And I do understand, I have spoken to a family member of BB King who said she was really touched that the King had chosen to come here to Southport and spend time with the local community here. I also understand that Taylor Swift has invited the bereaved families to come to her final UK concert at Wembley Stadium tonight and is expected to meet them.
It's a very intimate moment, isn't it? So soon after a tragedy that literally gripped the entire nation, chilled us to the heart. And this is the very, very best usage, is it not, Cameron Walker, of the royal family, to soothe communities, to help communities to make sense of trauma, of tragedy. And in that town square there, that's where that silent vigil took place before that riot broke out. And for the King to do this unscheduled tour, this is precisely, Cameron, what the royal family should be doing.
Yes, Martin, it's providing stability, it's providing leadership, and many have been questioning today why it has taken kind of 3 weeks for the King to be here in person, and there's very good reasons for that. First of all, what he wouldn't want to be doing is adding an extra burden onto the police officers or extra stress onto the police officers who are trying to deal with the aftermath of a horrific incident and indeed the riots. But also he wouldn't want to inflame any extra tensions by the King being here as riots are still going on. But now all of that has died down. It was thought that now is the right time for the King to come here, and everything of course is done in consultation with the British government. We saw the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary come here in the days immediately following the incident, and he would have been given the go-ahead from the government for the King to come here. But I think it shows how important it was for the King, for him to be here, because he did interrupt his holiday to be here in Southport and be with the community, because that was his priority, spending time with the community here, providing that reassurance and providing that sense that he is still supporting them and will continue to do so for the months and years ahead as they continue to rebuild and come together.
And also very touching from Taylor Swift. Of course, those children were at a Taylor Swift dance and yoga session when tragedy, unbelievable tragedy, struck both them, their families and this town, which will cast a very, very long shadow over their community, Cameron Walker. And Taylor Swift herself was very, very moved, traumatised by that event, and indeed a local support group, Swifties for Southport, raised a huge sum of money for the bereaved families and for the chance of the families to go down to Wembley and be special guests with Taylor Swift. It's an astonishing situation where a community going about its very, very ordinary day-to-day life, as many, many communities do across Britain, Cameron, suddenly, after this tragedy, a royal visit and now a visit to Taylor Swift, some good has come of these dark, dark hours.
Yeah, we know that Taylor Swift privately reached out to those affected by the tragedy, and she did release a statement pretty soon after the event on the 29th of July. And as you say, I do understand that the bereaved families are, or some of them at least, are going to be at the Taylor Swift concert tonight at her invitation, and perhaps we'll be meeting her as well backstage. And perhaps there is an indication as to why the meeting with the King and those bereaved families is taking place in London tomorrow, because of course Taylor Swift's final UK concert is happening at Wembley Stadium, and I think she has been enormously touched by I suppose the outpouring of grief from around the world for this community here in Southport. And I think because it was a dance class with her music as its theme, I think perhaps it has particularly hit home for her, which is why we saw that statement and this private outpouring from Taylor Swift to the families of those involved.
Thank you, Cameron Walker. Just a wonderful sight there. All those beautiful flowers and balloons behind you there in Southport. Thank you very much for joining us. You know, still, I think the entire nation is trying to come to terms with what happened in Southport. We mustn't forget that it was started by this terrible, terrible tragedy, the triple killing of those young girls. And we must also not forget about what caused it. Those riots, of course, there have been lots on lots of arrests. A lot of you have been getting in touch. June has sent this comment via your saying it's fantastic to see the King visiting Southport and listening to those who lost and had so much trauma. What I would like to see now is the Prime Minister listening to the British people as to why these riots took place in the first place. Stop calling us racist. Stop saying these incidents were clearly racist, as happened yesterday. And how about getting to terms with the fact that a lot of people in Britain are very, very concerned about uncontrolled immigration. Please, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, will you listen to us? June, I think that's beautifully put, and I think that's what needs to happen now. We saw scenes after the 2011 riots in Tottenham, which impacted the black communities. Politicians were very, very quick to go into receiver mode and to listen to communities about their concerns, perhaps in the name of social cohesion. That's what we need to do at present. There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including is working from home bad for productivity? Well, our Prime Minister doesn't seem to think so. In fact, he wants to enshrine the right to work at home and not be disturbed in law. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Mark White.
Well, just after 3:30, the latest news from the GB News Centre. King Charles has visited Southport today to meet survivors of last month's stabbing attack in the town, which left 3 girls dead and others injured. His Majesty also took time to meet members of the public who showed up for the visit. Earlier, he spoke to some of those who provided support in the aftermath of the attack. And he also thanked emergency service personnel who dealt with both the stabbings and the riots that followed. Rescue efforts are continuing for 6 people missing at sea after a British-flagged super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily. Among those unaccounted for is British businessman Mike Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter Hannah. We also now know that Morgan Stanley banking chairman Jonathan Bloomer and senior lawyer Chris Morvillo are also missing, along with their wives. 15 people, including the wife of Mike Lynch, were rescued after the vessel capsized during intense storms yesterday. Joe Biden became emotional as he delivered what's widely seen as his farewell speech to the Democratic National Convention. The US president wiped away tears as he addressed crowds on the first day of the event in Chicago. Kamala Harris will be formally declared as the party's election candidate later this week. Mr. Biden says she's the right choice for America. At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an airstrike on a school in Gaza, which Israel claims Hamas was using as a command centre. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who were captured in the 7th of October attacks. It comes as the US, Egypt and Qatar are calling on Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposal after it gained the backing of Israel last night. America's top diplomat, Antony Blinken, said it was a decisive moment. A group of migrants were heard banging and screaming for help, concealed in a refrigerated van as they were slowly starved of oxygen, a court has heard. Anas al-Mustafa is on trial for allegedly smuggling the 7 people from France to the UK via a ferry, hiding them in a cramped fake compartment. Crew members on the ship used an axe to free the migrants after hearing their pleas for help. 2 migrants lost consciousness before being rescued, and an Australian nurse on board helped provide oxygen. Al-Mustafa has denied the charges, and the trial continues at Lewes Crown Court. We're right up to date with the latest headlines. I'm back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some very wet and windy weather across the northwest tomorrow, but for the time being, we still have a blustery, showery theme across much of the country because of an area of low pressure just to the northwest of us, driving a fairly brisk westerly flow. And it's on this flow we're going to continue to see hefty showers, particularly to the northwest of the UK as we go through this evening and the start of the night. Elsewhere, many showers dying out, and a lot of the showers will ease with clear skies developing, and under those clear skies it is going to turn a bit cooler than it has done through some recent nights, especially towards the southeast. Towards the north and west, a bit of clouds starting to push in as we go towards dawn. We are then going to see increasing amounts of cloud coming in from the west as we go through the day, but starting off in the south, it's looking largely bright, just some hazy sunshine and a few showers towards western parts, sunnier and drier further east. Cloud then building across Northern Ireland through the morning and western parts of Scotland, and here it will quite quickly start to turn pretty wet as a weather system makes its way in. A drier picture though for eastern parts of Scotland as we go into the morning. That wet weather then will spill across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later into parts of northwestern England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. The heaviest rain will be across western parts of Scotland, where totals could reach 100 to 150 millimetres as we go into Thursday as well, so some disruption quite likely with a warning in force. Something a bit warmer and drier towards the southeast here, temperatures getting into the low 20s. More wet weather to come as we go through the evening and overnight, particularly across Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. A drier story further south. So it is looking wet for many of us for a time on Thursday as that system progresses its way further southeast, and then more rain to come on Friday. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M1 southbound in South Yorkshire. It's all due to an accident between junction 33 Catcliffe and 32 the M18 interchange in the roadworks area, although all vehicles have been moved to the hard shoulder. Slow for the M61 southbound in Manchester at junction 1, the Swinton interchange. We've got stop-start traffic on the M42 northbound in the roadworks in the West Midlands between junction 5, the Solihull bypass, and 6 Birmingham Airport. Also in the West Midlands, we've got the usual slowdown on the M5 northbound towards junction 8 of the M6. We're seeing slow traffic in Oxfordshire, very slow for the M40 southbound just before junction 9 Bicester, and queues on the M1 northbound in Bedfordshire. There's a lane block for an accident just after junction 11A for Dunstable. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:37. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, before the general election, the Labour Party promised we'd save 300 quid a year on our energy bills. Well, today that we're being told they'll go up by 150 quid. They also promised to get Britain working again. Well, today, the Labour Party want to enshrine the right to work from home in law. And guess what? You're not allowed to disturb them. Now, what's going on here? To help me make sense of this, I'm joined by a political guru, a political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, there's a lot of contradictions here. Cheaper energy bills. Sorry, we got that one wrong. We're going to be tough on law and order. Ooh, we're letting 2,000 lags out of jail now. I know it's silly season, but this is really silly.
You're being a bit unfair, Mark. Only slightly unfair. They said that we would have £100 off our energy bills by the end of the decade. That's part of the Green Pledge. But we have a forecast today from Cornwall Insight. They reckon the cap announced on Friday this week by Ofgem to go up by £146 on average. Now, set that against the removal of the £300 winter fuel allowance. It means it's a double whammy for pensioners who are going to get cold this winter while they look at the choices being made by the government on public sector pay. We know about train drivers getting a 14% pay rise over 3 years, 4.5% for this year. Guess what? The train guards are now meeting with the Department for Transport today. Mick Lynch, he's the General Secretary. They were offered 3.5% in April. They turned it down, and I reckon 4.5% might wet their whistle, make the station guards whistle and get that trilling away. He says today we want to move away from this belligerent and hostile approach of a last government and reset industrial relations to allow rail workers, etc., to get on with the job. He would say that, wouldn't he? Because that means there may be no strings attached. So no productivity gains, no demands for different working hours as was asked for under the Tory government. So there's choices being made by the government already. And you're right to have your head spinning, maybe.
Yeah, and to use another railway metaphor, it's all change. Mick Lynch, the bullet-headed baron, made his way for his bag of silver. That was going to happen, guaranteed to happen. The minute that one train union got their trough filled, Mick Lynch was going to be beating...
He calls it a parallel synchronised offer.
Which basically means I want what they got.
Yes.
Basically, I want what they got, and here's my point. Talking about all change, we were told there was a £22 billion financial black hole, a black hole that would consume the entire economy unless we made difficult decisions. How does that tally with throwing money at Mick Lynch, throwing £10 billion at NHS workers and teachers, £500 million to junior doctors, £100 million to train drivers? This black hole's getting blacker and blacker.
It means that there's peace. There are all these strikes which have made it difficult for commuters to get around and people to get treated on the NHS and the like. So that might ease up people's feeling about the government. But there's a cost to that. You're right. £22 billion was set aside estimated, I should say, by Rachel Reeves before Parliament broke up last month. Set against that, the issue of productivity. Remember the days when Jacob Rees-Mogg used to go around the Cabinet Office leaving notes on the desk of civil servants who weren't at work saying, sorry, I missed you, I hope to catch up with you next time. We hear from Sir Keir Starmer's government that they think that it's right to be able to switch off, and a culture of presenteeism, he said, can be damaging to productivity. So this new idea of right to switch off, to go home, put your Do Not Disturb sign up, and that's you. I know you, Martin, you're always alive. You're always tweeting away. I send you ideas late at night, you reply straight away, never off duty.
Politics never sleeps. But I'll be one of those people that gets a lawsuit against me because they're saying here, if bosses poke their beaks into employees' business after hours, they can get compo for it.
Yes. Well, it would be a civil case, and it could exacerbate payments. I mean, on a serious note, not everyone is lucky enough to work for GB News or in journalism generally, and there are jobs where you may want to switch off from a difficult boss, and it could be maybe an engineering company or a call centre where you want to be, your job is at work, and I've left work, I'm now at home, I'm with the kids. And also, if you're a carer for parents or for children at home, you may want to have time alone.
Well, Keir Starmer, of course, wants to be a part-time Prime Minister. 6 o'clock Fridays were enshrined in his
because he observes the Jewish faith, Martin.
He said, except that's all going out the window because of what's happened with the recent riots and the courts being open 24 hours a day. That brings me on to my next point, Chris. We've got Lee Anderson on the show at the top of the 4 o'clock hour. He's written a stiff letter to Yvette Cooper about the Home Office putting out the mugshots, saying 1,100 arrests. Now, he's saying this gets in the way of the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. The next all-change position I'd like to talk about with you here, Chris, is this idea of we're going to bung these people in prison for Facebook posts, for being at the same riot at the wrong time, even without them even knowing, and yet 2,000 cons are going to be released. Now, Chris, call me Mystic Meg, there could be a disaster waiting to happen if any of those serious criminals go on to offend while these Facebook posters are serving porridge.
Quite right. I mean, 2,000 criminals, lag, set to release on September the 10th. Mark your diary. That released early, having served 40% of their term, not half of their term, don't forget. A further 1,700 in October. 5,000 or so over 18 months. This is a release pressure on the jails. Of course, we've seen the swift action against those who may have posted in haste and regret, definitely in their leisure. In fact, at Her Majesty's pleasure, at their leisure. You got 470 charged so far. 1,000 arrested. Lee Anson may be asking those other 500, if they haven't been charged, is it right to have their images there? And that might damage their career and the like. So, yeah, it's an unpopular position Lee is taking there, because many would think if you're involved in trouble, then, you should get what the law chucks you. But we have a right to due to innocence until you're proven guilty in this country.
And he's even intimating in the letter, more than that, of course, at 4 o'clock when he joins, is in fighting 4 months in Hampshire free. He's even intimating that there may have been a potential contempt of court here, because you're putting mugshots out of people who've been arrested. They haven't been found guilty yet, and they may not be found guilty. They might be, but they might not be.
You've got this former DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, who oversaw the prosecutions in the 2011 riots in Sir Keir Starmer, and he is showing he knows how to pull the levers of the criminal justice system. And has he gone too far? Is it right to name and shame people before they've been through the court system? Because employers might see those faces online and go, well, I'm not sure about this guy, even though he may have been innocently caught up in the trouble.
And it's interesting, we just had pictures there from Southport, where, of course, King Charles has been, to mark that tragic triple killing. And we had a message in from a viewer called June. June was saying the King is doing an amazing thing by going to soothe the community, but can the Prime Minister now listen to the communities around Britain to try and understand the frustrations that in some part helped to drive the frustration behind these riots? Chris, you and I talk about this very often on this show. Do you think that conversation should happen? I believe it needs to happen. Do you think it will?
I think it needs to happen. I think so far the government is in being a defensive mode. It's just dealing with the trouble as it sees it. We saw yesterday Sir Keir Starmer in Northern Ireland talking about these clearly racist riots, and that seemed just...
That went down terribly yesterday.
Because the problem is, by saying that, you're just kind of putting everybody into the same basket. No one... Obviously, violence is utterly out of order. Racism is utterly out of order. But equally, people are concerned about immigration, and to imply that anyone with those concerns is racist or a thug gets it wrong. And we see from our inbox daily, don't we, on your programme, particularly and elsewhere at GB News.
OK, super stuff. Now, make sure you come back at 4 o'clock.
I'll be here.
Join me for that little debate with Lee Anderson. It's going to be a corker. Thank you, Chris Hope. Always a pleasure. Now, up next, librarians in Wales have been told to stop meeting in racist buildings as part of their critical whiteness cause, whatever that is. Have we completely lost the plot? How can a building be racist? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Alex, can you tell us about Tom Cruise's diet?
Tom Cruise's diet, I mean, so there was the story today in the Daily Mail talking about the fact that obviously, the guy has a very, very strict diet. He pretty much has no alcohol in his diet, has very strict times he eats. He only eats meat and fish.
Isn't happy.
And actually, can I just say, I think this is very depressing. Life is short. I don't know why people have... And lots of my friends who go to the gym, they're absolutely obsessed with only having chicken and rice and barely any sauce on it. It's just, what's the point,
You make a good point. Life is short. What do they...
And so is Tom Cruise.
YOLO, you only live once.
Yeah, YOLO.
But then you can live your life as you want to live it. So if you want to live it the healthiest person ever in the whole world, then, that's your one life.
But you raised a great point in the meeting today, which is 64 old anymore? It's not, sort of 62. It's not old, is it?
No.
62 is the new 40.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, Tom Cruise is a multi-millionaire. Doesn't he want to just, relax and enjoy his life now? Why is he still getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym and eating chicken breasts with no sauce on it?
Yeah. OK, Tom Cruise is another one of these driven people. Tom Cruise is absolutely 100% driven to drive a fighter pilot aeroplane. I mean, how could you actually learn to drive a plane? He is so driven, he is so disciplined, and when you're that disciplined, you know about blood, alcohol, sugar spikes. I bet you he drinks vinegar. Bet you any money he's into gut health. I'm telling you, gut health is in. Everyone's talking about gut health.
But what's the point when you're 62?
No,
I'm hoping when I'm 62 that I'll just chill out.
He doesn't.
No way.
He doesn't need the money
Eat some
either. He can
donuts.
just chill. Like,
No, he
guys
doesn't
just
want to chill. He so doesn't want to chill. I tell you what, in Hollywood, because my husband's a film producer, in Hollywood, you know when they retire? They're either 90 or they're dead.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:49. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the devolved Welsh Government is telling librarians to avoid holding meetings in what they're calling racist buildings. One of those added to the list is the William Gladstone Library, named after the legendary 19th century Prime Minister. It's all part of their plans to eradicate systemic racism by 2030. Well, join us now is the broadcaster Judita De Silva. Judita, welcome to the show. How, in the name of God, can a building be racist?
I think that this is one of those issues where the intention is right, but the execution is somewhat flawed. Because when a lot of these buildings were erected and then named after historical figures that their wealth, their fortune, their position was amassed from the transatlantic slave trade, the very presence of that name tinges the building in a history that causes a lot of injury to a lot of the descendants of slaves and Black people and Asian people in general. So that's what they're quote unquote calling a racist building. It just happens to have a racially traumatizing history based on who it's named after. The sentiment behind doing it is an honorable one, because you're beginning to recognize what it's like for people, for Black people, Asian people, who this is the architecture that their history is written with. What it feels like just moving around Wales or any countries in Britain. This is what the triggers, the memories they have to deal with all the time, which is completely flies over the head of their white counterparts. So when you're saying that you're trying to redress that, it's an awareness that there has to be a reticence about what this means, the different meanings these buildings have to different people. But I do think that changing names or eradicating history has never been a desire for Black people. We've always said, tell history, but tell it in its totality. Be honest about it. Don't edit it, and omissions basically devolve the authenticity of history being marked. Tell the whole story. And it would mean more to have these stories that have the way you have blue plaques on heritage buildings. So if you're walking down a road, you know that's a special building because you just see the blue plaque. You should have plaques on these buildings that are named after slave owners and slave traders, because it gives context. Because then when you walk through the streets of Wales or Britain, you begin to understand how steeped in the history of slavery the building of Britain's greatness was.
Judita, you've kind of hit the nail on the head. In one respect, what a great place to actually have a conversation then about Britain's heritage, its past, its flawed history, and also to mark the fact that Britain, the United Kingdom, was at the very, very forefront of ending the international slave trade at great expense, great loss of life, great deployment of our Royal Navy and military. So many thousands of soldiers and Navy men died of tropical illnesses trying to end slavery. I put it to you, it would be a perfect conversation to have, a rounded conversation, without editing out the positive bits and just making it all about the bad bits, to actually do it in these buildings to mark their involvement and to try and make it progressive rather than make it Orwellian. I do agree to an extent that, yes, we have a meeting of minds that
holding it in a building actually has more poignancy to it, because once you give it the context of what that building means, you begin to have a more three-dimensional understanding for what your Black counterparts are going through standing in that building or sitting in that building or having the building hold so much weight and importance in the country, knowing the pain, suffering, and death that built it. So, it commemorates. And when you tell things like, again, what I said about telling history in its totality, both positive and negative, while you speak of the soldiers who sacrificed fighting it, you also have to tell the story of slavery ended in Britain from a really, really huge payoff. And what you had, that only I think was completed near a decade ago, and what you had was the irony of the descendants of slaves through their taxes paying off the descendants of slave owners for the inconvenience.
We could also have a conversation about the Muslim slave trade, about modern slavery that blights a lot of Africa. And actually, a lot of the slave keepers in this modern day and age are Black people keeping other Black slaves. But we don't want to do that, do we? We just want to make this about Britain's shameful heritage. And that's why I think a lot of people have a problem with this. We have to leave it there, Judy.
Those conversations, like you mentioned, are had in those countries. If you travel to Africa and you go to and you see the history that's told,
I doubt that's the case, because those... Anyway, look, we have to move on, Judita. Always a pleasure to have you.
No, because I did actually
OK, thank you very much. We have to leave it there. Look, Lee Anderson's up next. Talk about the Reform Town Hall takeover across Britain. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. It's your weather now with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some very wet and windy weather across the northwest tomorrow, but for the time being, we still have a blustery, showery theme across much of the country because of an area of low pressure just to the northwest of us, driving a fairly brisk westerly flow. And it's on this flow we're going to continue to see hefty showers, particularly to the northwest of the UK as we go through this evening and the start of the night. Elsewhere, many showers dying out, and a lot of the showers will ease with clear skies developing. And under those clear skies, it is going to turn a bit cooler than it has done through some recent nights, especially towards the southeast, towards the north and west. A bit of clouds starting to push in as we go towards dawn. We are then going to see increasing amounts of cloud coming in from the west as we go through the day. But starting off in the south, it's looking largely bright, just some hazy sunshine and a few showers towards western parts, sunnier and drier further east. Cloud then building across Northern Ireland through the morning and western parts of Scotland, and here it will quite quickly start to turn pretty wet as a weather system makes its way in. A drier picture though for eastern parts of Scotland as we go into the morning. That wet weather then will spill across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later into parts of northwestern England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. The heaviest rain will be across western parts of Scotland, where totals could reach 100 to 150 millimetres as we go into Thursday as well. So some disruption quite likely with a warning in force. Something a bit warmer and drier towards the southeast here, temperatures getting into the low 20s. More wet weather to come as we go through the evening and overnight, particularly across Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. A drier story further south. So it is looking wet for many of us for a time on Thursday as that system progresses its way further southeast, and then more rain to come on Friday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News. The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. On the M57 northbound in Merseyside near Knowsley, the entry slip road is closed for emergency resurfacing repairs. That's at junction 5 for the East Lancs Road. In the West Midlands, we're seeing the usual slow traffic for the M5 northbound to join the M6 at junction 8. Queues on the M1 northbound in Bedfordshire. There's a lane closed for a broken down lorry just after junction 11A Dunstable that's causing queues. We're also seeing slow traffic on several locations on the M25. Firstly, clockwise, we're seeing delays just before junction 15 for the M4. Clockwise, we're seeing queues into the roadworks just before junction 10, the Wisley interchange, where it's also slow for the A3. And it's also stop-start M25 anti-clockwise just before junction 12 for the M3. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, GBNews.com.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm John from sunny North Yorkshire, and I've just won £20,000 in the GB News Great British giveaway. It didn't cost much to enter, but of course if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am having won £20,000, and that's tax-free, so I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, as a search for the missing British tycoon Mike Lynch enters now its second day, we'll be live from the Sicilian coast, where investigators are desperately searching for survivors and trying to piece together exactly what's happened to the billionaire's super yacht. We'll also be joined by an oceanographer with lots of experience of rescue missions. Next up is the Reform Party launching a town hall takeover of councils ahead of the local elections next May. We'll put that question to Reform's Lee Anderson, who yesterday dramatically scooped up 3 independent councillors in Gwent, Wales. And later in the show, I'll be joined by the head of that council. And King Charles received a very warm welcome in Southport earlier today as he arrived to meet survivors of the attack in which 3 young girls were tragically stabbed to death. And the UK's first safe drug consumption facility will open in Glasgow next month. Is it encouraging people to become addicts? That's all coming up in your next hour. Whilst the show, always a delight to have your company. Now stay tuned, because in about 15 minutes' time, Lee Anderson will be gracing your screens. He is on fighting form. Yesterday, scooped up 3 councillors from Gwent in Wales. Are we seeing a Reform Party town hall takeover? The embryonic movement of a nationwide movement breaking out. Also, Lee Anderson wrote a very stiff letter to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, about the 1,000+ arrests and the images put out on social media by the Home Office, accusing, he thinks, people of their guilt until they're proved innocent. Is that the right thing to do, or is it simply stoking up resentment in a community always fractured by those recent riots? Get in touch the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say, but now's your headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 4. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. King Charles has visited Southport today to meet survivors of last month's stabbing attack in the town, which left 3 girls dead and others injured. His Majesty also took time to meet members of the public who showed up for the visit. Earlier, he spoke to some of those who provided support in the aftermath of the attack. And he also thanked emergency service personnel who dealt with both the stabbings and the riots that followed. Rescue efforts are continuing for 6 people missing at sea after a British-flagged super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily. Among those unaccounted for is British businessman Mike Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter Hannah. And we now know Morgan Stanley banking chairman Jonathan Bloomer and senior lawyer Chris Morvillo are also missing along with their wives. 15 people, including the wife of Mike Lynch, were rescued after the vessel capsized during intense storms yesterday. Marco Tilota from the Palmero Diving Unit told reporters that dive teams are encountering significant challenges in their attempts to access the wreck.
The difficulties of the case are dictated by the depth that does not allow for long working times. So you understand well that the conditions of the hull are tilted 90 degrees. Access to the hull is difficult. If you manage to get inside the hull, you understand well that inside there is a world of objects. So penetrating inside and descending into the compartment below from the stairs that are narrow and going into all the cabins is a really hard and difficult job.
Well, it's also been confirmed that a British businessman who stood trial in the US alongside missing tycoon Mike Lynch has died after being hit by a car. Stephen Chamberlain was killed while out running in Cambridgeshire on Saturday. Both men had recently been acquitted of fraud in the US federal court relating to the sale of their company to software giant Hewlett-Packard for £8.6 billion. Joe Biden became emotional as he delivered what's widely seen as his farewell speech to the Democratic National Convention. The US president wiped away tears as he addressed crowds on the first day of the event in Chicago. Kamala Harris will be formally declared as the party's election candidate later this week. Mr. Biden says she's the right choice for America.
Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
Intelligence officials say Iran was behind a hack on Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It follows allegations Tehran tried to infiltrate personal email accounts of around a dozen people linked to the former president and to Joe Biden. The FBI and other federal agencies say the operation was designed to stoke discord and undermine confidence in democracy. At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an airstrike on a school in Gaza. Israel claims Hamas was using the school as a command centre. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who were captured on the 7th of October attacks. It comes as the US, Egypt and Qatar are calling on Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposal after it gained the backing of Israel last night. A court has heard how a group of migrants were banging and screaming for help concealed in a refrigerated van as they were slowly starved of oxygen. Anas al-Mustafa is on trial for allegedly smuggling 7 people from France to the UK, hiding them in cramped fake vehicle compartment in the vehicle. Crew members on a ferry carrying the vehicle used an axe to free the migrants after hearing their pleas for help. 2 of them lost consciousness before being rescued. Al-Mustafa has denied the charges and the trial continues at Lewes Crown Court. The final 31 Ted Baker stores are expected to close by the end of today after the company behind the fashion chain collapsed back in March. More than 500 jobs are at risk. They include locations at Heathrow and Gatwick Airport, London's Regent Street, Bath, York and Portsmouth. Well, you're right up to date with all the latest headlines. We're back with more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Mark. Now, divers have entered the sunken super yacht as the hunt now continues for the missing passengers, with experts dubbing the operation very complicated. British tech tycoon Mike Lynch and his daughter are among 6 tourists still missing after a luxury yacht sank in a tornado off the coast of Sicily. And GB News' reporter Adam Cherry is on the scene there. Adam, so now we are in this second desperate day of what increasingly is looking like a recovery mission and not a rescue mission. What's the latest?
Well, Martin, there is some pushback on that from engineers who say that actually because of the size of this vessel, there may be large air pockets within the hull which provide enough air for another 24 hours or so. So we're in a critical point. But it's not necessarily entirely just a recovery mission yet. On that point, the Italian fire service spokesman has said that they have not been able to see anything inside the yacht in their most recent dives. And remember, they had to come up every 12 minutes. So it's very difficult for them to make any significant progress. Not to mention the fact that it's almost 200 feet below the surface of the water. And because it's intact, it's very difficult to break into it and access the cabins where we suspect most of those, all of those 6 really, missing people would be, given the time at which the vessel sank, which is very early in the morning. Everyone's still in bed. There is some good news already, though, which is that of the 15 people who have been rescued so far, at least 3 have been discharged from hospital, and they were seen leaving hospital earlier today in Palermo, which is about 10 miles away from where we are right now. But as we say, it's a very difficult situation. It's a 24-hour period now, which is really serious, and the clock is ticking.
OK, Adam Cherry, thank you very much for the update there, live from the scene. And to continue this conversation, I'm now joined by the oceanographer, Dr. Simon Boxall. Simon, welcome to the show. Fascinated to get you on the show, of course. I remember very well during the Titan submarine rescue mission, or we hoped it was, you gave some expert opinion. And what I'd like to get from you, if I could, Dr. Boxall, is the type of circumstances that the divers are likely to be operating under. We know that the yacht is in 50 metres of water. What would that mean in terms of the access, in terms of the equipment, in terms of how far they have visibility? Help us to kind of see, undersea, if you can.
In this area, the visibility should be pretty good. I've worked in this area and the seas are quite clear. The big problem is 50 metres of water. That is shallow enough to send divers down, but these are specialist divers. They're going in sort of with mixed gases. They can only sort of be down there for a short period of time before they have to come back up. Otherwise, they get decompression sickness. So they're doing it in sort of short bursts of, I suppose, exploration. And also going into a vessel like this is very dangerous. We don't know how stable it is on the seabed. There's a great danger that they themselves could become trapped as well. So it's an operation that's got to be carried out very, very carefully. At the moment, the seas are reasonably calm, but they are whipping up quite quickly. We've seen a number of storms go through the area. And again, this can affect the whole sort of, I use the word rescue, optimistically rescue operation. As was said, there are possibilities that there are pockets of air in the boat, which means that someone could survive that. But only time will tell. You know, it'll likely to be a recovery mission.
And Simon, in terms of that passing storm, for example, would that have whipped up all of the seabed? Would that in itself make the visibility very tricky? And in terms of debris from within the ship, I mean, if a diver gets caught down there, they're in perilous danger too, right?
They are. I mean, the storm itself at that depth, 50 metres, won't have stirred up the seafloor. So the seafloor, that area should be reasonably clear. It is this whole business, though, that, you know, the boat is intact. The report we're getting back from divers is that it is intact, which means that the only way in is to literally go in through the hatches, and that's a slow process. We know they've already been into the bridge, which is chaotic. They've had problems with furniture being in the way. You can imagine sort of taking a house, turning it upside down and shaking it around a bit, and then trying to navigate your way through it in the dark. And it is difficult. Although the visibility is good, they're reliant on torches, on sort of lights down there. And as I said, it's short periods. They were saying 12 minutes at a time. You can imagine that takes a long time.
And in terms of the temperature of the water, I'm trying to think if there is a scintilla of hope here, Dr. Boxall, of there being survivors down there in that hull. Just say there are pockets of air. What other circumstances are against those that may be down there with some small chance of life?
Well, normally, if we're looking at the ocean, we're looking at the North Sea, North Atlantic, then the point at which you become hypothermic and then effectively pass away is fairly quick. But here in the Mediterranean, we've got very warm waters, abnormally warm. We've seen temperatures now which are 3.5 degrees warmer than normal for this time of year. If you look at the last 20 years, I was looking at the data yesterday from satellites, and we have got very warm water. So that works on the side of both the rescuers and anyone who might be trapped. I think it's important to emphasize it's a very slim chance, but there's always hope.
And what about in terms of, again, just these extra percentile chances of there being hope? May there be breathing equipment, survival equipment that may prolong any hope?
Not within the boat itself. You wouldn't normally have that sort of equipment in the boat. They're reliant very much on air pockets. But this is a big vessel. We're looking at something that is absolutely huge. I think we tend to think of yachts as being quite small. It is a sailing yacht. But I mean, the mast itself is so big, you can walk down the middle of it, and it's almost the length of a 100-metre pitch. It's 80 metres tall. So, things are big proportions here. That includes the living areas. It's watertight, which means that if it did capsize, there's a chance that air pockets might be there. But we just keep having to hope that there might be some survivors down there.
OK, thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. Oceanographer Dr. Simon Boxall, thank you for sharing your expertise. Always very, very much appreciated. Now, King Charles received a very warm welcome in Southport earlier on today as he arrived to meet survivors of the attack in which 3 young girls were tragically killed. Let's find out more now from GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker.
This is a community still grieving from the horrific attack which took place on the 29th of July, just over 3 weeks ago, where 3 young girls tragically lost their lives. And King Charles chose today to come here to Southport, interrupting his holiday, to be with the communities here and show his continued support for them. In the town hall, he met privately with some of the survivors from that attack at the Taylor Swift themed dance class, as well as their families. He also spent longer than was expected with members of the local community outside of the town hall. Hundreds of people had waited for hours to catch a glimpse of King Charles and maybe catch 1 or 2 words with him as well. The King also met with some volunteers who went above and beyond in the immediate aftermath of both the attacks and the riots to help the community rebuild. So, for example, he met with an ice cream shop owner who had given out free ice cream to the local community in the immediate aftermath of the attack to bring the communities together. A building merchant who had rebuilt some of the walls and repaired the glass from that in the aftermath of the riots after the Southport attack. And the King had been asked to be given daily updates of both the attack and indeed the riots. And following his time here at the town hall, as well as an unscheduled stop to see the sea of flowers which has remained here for the last 3 weeks or so, he went to the community fire station where he met some emergency responders, fire service, ambulance service, as well as the police, who have obviously had to deal with such a horrific situation, both with the attack itself and indeed the aftermath with the rioting. And the King spent time with them, but perhaps very poignant for him, very important for him, was speaking to different faith leaders from across the spectrum here in Southport. If you remember, just a few days after the attack, there was some violent disorder outside the mosque here in Southport, and part of King Charles's lifelong work is, as well as when he was Prince of Wales was to really get a sense of community cohesion and getting different faith leaders to speak together and keep the peace, essentially. So that was a key theme of King Charles's visit here. But I also spoke to Councillor David Neary, who's been really unofficially looking after these flowers here, and he had a chance to speak to the King earlier, and this is what he told me.
To curate kindness to organise it, but the best of humanity is what we've seen in the last 2-3 weeks, and we will get back to something like normal. We'll never forget what's happened, never forget what's happened, but Southport and the people of Southport are resilient, generous, kind, and we will be okay.
Well, tomorrow King Charles will be in London, where he will meet the bereaved families of those 3 victims who lost their lives, BB King, Elsie Stankham and Alice De Silva Aguirre. All 3 family members or representatives from those families will be meeting the King in London tomorrow. And I also understand that tonight members of those families will be meeting Taylor Swift and watching her concert at Wembley Stadium.
Thank you, Cameron Walker there, live from Southport. Now, you can fail to be moved by those balloons and those flowers in the background. The fantastic use of the King's time. But we were contacted by a reader, a viewer, June, earlier, who said it's great that the community is being soothed, but now perhaps the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, should listen to the public. Why did these riots happen? And we had a response to that, to June's email from Adrian, who said, well said to you, June. Martin, that's it in a nutshell. Now the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, needs to listen to the people. We deserve to be listened to as well. Now, Reform UK seem to be recruiting councillors as 3 defect to Nigel Farage's party in Wales. I'll be speaking to their Chief Whip, Lee Anderson, next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
A court on Wednesday ruled that a teenager was wrongly ignored before being forced into end-of-life care. Sudiksha Thirumalesh, who was 19, died last year after being prevented from travelling abroad for treatment after doctors said her condition was incurable. Doctors said Ms. Thirumalesh's objection to their decision was unreasonable and that she should have all life-sustaining treatment ended and be put on a palliative care pathway. Last August, a ruling said that the teenager lacked mental capacity to make her own decisions, but 3 judges in the Court of Appeal overturned that decision last week. Lawyers said the move reaffirms the right of patients to disagree with their doctors. The teenager remained fully conscious while being treated by the University Hospitals Birmingham NHS Foundation Trust. Well, to discuss this tragic case, Sudiksha's father, Thirumalesh, and brother, Varshan, join me now. Thank you so much for joining me in these desperately sad circumstances. This is very important for other people who may find themselves in a similar position, that they will be able to make decisions about their own care with the support of their families, rather than there's sometimes arrogance of the medical profession who think that they know best. So you must be, I hope, very reassured by this judgment that Sudiksha has achieved something for other people.
Yes, definitely, because this arrogance transformed into cruelty towards my sister's care and ill treatment of the whole family. They think they are on the top of the hierarchical spectrum, and they treated us like we were on the bottom of the lower end of the chains, or rather as low class, but we ensured that our class remained.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:22. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. 3 councillors have joined Reform UK and become the party's first elected politicians in Wales. Now, just a few councillors defecting might seem hardly revolutionary, but is this a sign that Nigel Farage and his party are serious about targeting Labour's heartland? Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is our political editor, Christopher Hope, and shortly we're going to cross to Lee Anderson, the man himself. But before that, Chris, what do you make of this dramatic intervention? Lee Anderson went to Gwent yesterday. 3 previously independent councillors have crossed the floor. Councillor Dave Thomas, Alan Slade and Jason O'Connell now wearing the Reform rosette.
On the same journey, it sounds like, that Lee Anderson made. Of course, he's a former Labour councillor who then stood as a Tory MP in Ashfield. Of course, now he's the Reform UK MP for Ashfield, so he's on the similar journey. What's going on behind the scenes now with Reform UK is that Nigel Farage is working very closely with the party's chairman to organise ahead of next May's local elections. I think mainly in England, actually. But anyway, they're building a local network of Reform UK politicians who can try and bed down and deliver on the promise. I mean, Nigel Farage himself has said before, it's a 5-year plan. He's looking at 2028, 2029. He's talked about even taking over from the Tory party, and, you know, we'll see that when it happens. But that's his idea. He himself, though, I was covering the Brexit Party European election campaign. It was May 2019. That's right. When you were a candidate in the West Midlands, Martin. I was with him in Merthyr Tydfil. I was with him for 2 weeks, the only journalist there with him, and he was heckled. He was told, we don't want you here. There's a bit of anti-ness about Nigel Farage. Whether that was a personal thing about the Brexit Party, I'm not sure. But I think it's fascinating. I think you are going to see these eruptions of councillors defecting, and what that means is you've got this local network, roots are being put down by this nascent party.
And of course UKIP did that back in the day from 2015 onwards. They got that ground game. They knew where their vote...
before that, I would say, 2012.
2012. Yeah. They knew where their vote was. They had a local organisation, and all of that time-consuming, laborious, some might say rather unsexy side of politics, maybe Reform as a new party are starting to understand, like Liberal Democrats became so successful at knowing where their vote is. They've got to get in at council level.
Councillors know where the voters are, because the problem that Nigel Farage has always had is data. You don't know where the voters live. Most people don't move house a lot, which means that the legacy parties, Labour, Lib Dems, Tories, know where their voters live by and large. Give or take, there'll be some movement, but normally they know, knock on the door, Mrs Miggins at 42 Acacia Avenue, and she votes Labour. So it goes on. That's how it works. But you've got these local councillors here. They know where Reform UK voters might be, and it might help them next year.
OK, so we're still waiting for Lee Anderson. In fact, I think he's still waiting for a link. So, team, can we get that to Lee sharpish? He is raring to go. Until that moment, let's continue the conversation. How successful do you think this is likely to be? I mean, 3 in Wales is still an overridingly Labour area. It holds 29 of 40 seats on this particular council, the Labour Party. The 3 independents are very much isolated, but this is the beginnings, perhaps, of something nationwide.
It's symbolic. If you believe the hype that Nigel Farage trumpets, I mean, his point is this is the beginning of a revolution. People are upset and concerned about the Tory party. 4 million or so voted Reform UK in last month's election. I would say most of them were Tory voters who fell out with the party over immigration and the mess they made of Brexit, but it could well have been some Labour voters too. And I think this journey, these 3 are on, appear to be very similar to the ones taken by Lee Anderson up in Ashfield.
And it's an interesting journey, as you said there. So Councillor David Thomas was a Labour councillor until 2019. Brexit made him change his tune. Again, that's exactly what happened to Lee Anderson, and actually lots and lots, in fact, millions of red wall voters. A lot of people being on that same journey. I wonder if that's an interesting point, because Nigel Farage said after the last general election, now we're going to take the battle to the Labour Party. And don't forget the recent riots, the social unrest in the 7 most deprived towns across England, with the highest proportion of asylum seekers. Those are Labour seats. I wonder if this is the message that will be landing in Labour territory.
Well, Farage himself, he says, he has always said to us that he thinks many of these people are Labour voters. I think majority are Tory voters, but let's not go there. But I think, yeah, many are Labour, and also look at Labour. Morgan McSweeney, who's the chief strategist for the Sickest Army, he's been reported to be concerned about reform. He knows that as many as 80 seats Reform were a close second to Labour. If they can neutralise the Reform UK vote and deal with that, they can then even cement in the second term, which they're now planning for in Labour High Command. So I think there's real concern about Reform UK and understanding why people voted for Reform UK if they were formerly of a Labour background.
And in the video yesterday of Lee in Gwent, he was very fighting for me. He was saying Labour have been useless in Wales. These lot are the People's Army. And indeed, Councillor David Thomas, who we'll speak to at about 5:15, he's coming on the show to talk us about his new conversion to Reform. He has now actually been installed as the Reform leader for Wales. So, Chris, it does seem as though, at least in Wales, at least the Reform Party are on manoeuvres.
And calling himself Reform UK leader will mean he gets a bigger profile there. There'll be a voice that can talk for Wales about Welsh issues from a Reform UK standpoint. So this is the behind the scenes. What's happening here is you've got these tentacles being attached to the kind of bedrock of Welsh politics.
Where else do you think this might land nationwide? There are a lot of kind of sleeper cells, if you like, of the old Kippers, of the old Brexit Party network. They stood at general election. They came second in a heck of a lot of seats. So in that instance, Nigel Farage will have more data now, certain than before. Will that, do you think, give them a steer of where they should be trying to do these sorts of manoeuvres?
It might do. I do think the 5 MPs that the Reform Party won at last month's election was driven a lot as much by the anger and fury with the Tory Party over, well, during the campaign itself, over the gambling scandal and the D-Day issue with Rishi Sunak. But I think, broadly, I think data might come back, but it's not there yet, really, for Reform UK. No evidence of it anyway.
OK, we're going to pick up this conversation after the news. We're going to get hold of that man, Lee Anderson, and have this conversation more expansively. Chris, please stick around if you can.
I'm here.
And let's cross-examine the fella. There's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including legalised shooting up centres, sensible practice or a pathway to addiction. That, of course, is after Scotland's sky-high death by drug data out today. And we're debating that hot topic next. But first, here's your news headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon, it's 4:30. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. King Charles has visited Southport today to meet survivors of last month's stabbing attack in the town, which left 3 girls dead and others injured. His Majesty also took time to meet members of the public who showed up for the visit. Earlier, he spoke to some of those who provided support in the aftermath of the attack. And he also thanked emergency service personnel who dealt with both the stabbings and the riots that followed. Rescue efforts are continuing for 6 off the coast of Sicily. Among those unaccounted for is British businessman Mike Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter Hannah. And we now know Morgan Stanley banking chairman Jonathan Bloomer and senior lawyer Chris Morvillo are also missing along with their wives. 15 people, including the wife of Mike Lynch, were rescued after the vessel capsized during intense storms yesterday. At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an airstrike on a school in Gaza. Israel claims Hamas was using the school as a command centre. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who were captured in the 7th of October attacks. It comes as the US, Egypt and Qatar are calling on Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposal after it gained the backing of Israel last night. Joe Biden became emotional as he delivered what's widely seen as his farewell speech to the Democratic National Convention. The US president wiped away tears as he addressed crowds on the first day of the event in Chicago. Kamala Harris will be formally declared as the party's election candidate later this week. Mr. Biden says she's the right choice for America. The final 31 Ted Baker stores are due to close by this evening after the company behind the fashion chain collapsed back in March. More than 500 jobs are affected by the closures. They include locations at Heathrow and Gatwick Airport, London's Regent Street, Bath, York and Portsmouth. That's all from us for the moment. You're right up to date. More headlines in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some very wet and windy weather across the northwest tomorrow, but for the time being, we still have a blustery, showery theme across much of the country because of an area of low pressure just to the northwest of us, driving a fairly brisk westerly flow. And it's on this flow we're going to continue to see hefty showers, particularly to the northwest of the UK as we go through this evening and the start of the night. Elsewhere, many showers dying out, and a lot of the showers will ease with clear skies developing. And under those clear skies, it is going to turn a bit cooler than it has done through some recent nights, especially towards the southeast, towards the north and west. A bit of clouds starting to push in as we go towards dawn. We are then going to see increasing amounts of cloud coming in from the west as we go through the day. But starting off in the south, it's looking largely bright, just some hazy sunshine and a few showers towards western parts, sunnier and drier further east. Cloud then building across Northern Ireland through the morning and western parts of Scotland, and here it will quite quickly start to turn pretty wet as a weather system makes its way in. A drier picture though for eastern parts of Scotland as we go into the morning. That wet weather then will spill across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later into parts of northwestern England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. The heaviest rain will be across western parts of Scotland, where totals could reach 100 to 150 millimetres as we go into Thursday as well. So some disruption quite likely with a warning in force. Something a bit warmer and drier towards the southeast here, temperatures getting into the low 20s. More wet weather to come as we go through the evening and overnight, particularly across Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. A drier story further south. So it is looking wet for many of us for a time on Thursday as that system progresses its way further southeast, and then more rain to come on Friday. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M8 westbound in West Lothian, just before junction 4 Whitburn. We're also seeing slow traffic on the M90 northbound in Perth and Kinross at junction 12, the Broxton roundabout. We've got the usual stop-start traffic for the M5 northbound in the West Midlands to join the M6 at junction 8. Slow over the M25 clockwise in Berkshire, just before junction 15 of the M4. We're seeing slow traffic on the M25 into the roadworks anti-clockwise, just before junction 10, the Wisley interchange, but it's also slow for the A3. Roadworks also causing delays on the M1 into the roadworks northbound in Bedfordshire around junction 10 Luton Airport, and in Devon the A361 in Barnstable is closed in both directions for an accident between the Lake Roundabout and the Sticklepath junction. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back, 4:36 of your time. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, return now to the story that 3 councillors have joined Reform UK and become the party's first elected politicians in Wales. And let's join now with Lee Anderson, the Reform UK MP. Lee, welcome to the show. So you had a trip to the valleys yesterday and you came home with some bounty. Tell us more.
Yeah, I came back with some very, very good news, Martin. 3 brilliant local independent councillors on Tuffane Council have made the brave and bold decision, the right decision, may I add, to join Reform UK Wales. And they are the first Reform group of councillors in the whole of Wales. It's an historic moment. And I tell you what, the feeling I got around the town and in the pub that we went into after is that Reform, the People's Army, are now on the march in Wales. And that's wonderful news for the people of Wales who, quite frankly, have been let down for donkey's years by the Labour Party.
Now, Lee, you were saying in the video that Labour have been useless in Wales. This lot are the People's Army, but it's fair to point out that on this particular council, the Labour Party holds 29 of 40 seats, the Reform 3, a former Independent 3. There they are in a bit of a Reservoir Dogs-style video there, Lee. Have you strolled in down outside the Boozer in slow motion? I'd expect no less from you and the Reform Party. But tell us, can you make a serious difference? The Brexit Party did OK at the 2019 European elections. A couple of MEPs got away. But the Brexit Party and Reform have never won anything in Wales. What's different this time?
It's a lot different, Martin. The actual feeling out there on the ground, on the doorstep. Look, you know, this place I went to yesterday is not too dissimilar from places like Ashfield, red wall areas, working class areas, where traditionally we've always had a Labour council and a Labour MP. And look at my area, compare it to Ashfield, which you can do, I think. You know, I was my vote share last time, Martin, actually went up. You know, I was one of only 2 red wallers from the 2019 election who retained a seat. The other was Matt Vickers up in Stockton, but he had a very, very kind boundary change. Look, people out there want change, and Reform UK offers something different. People are sick to death of voting for something and getting something completely different. And I tell you what, we'll stick to our guns. We'll keep pumping the same message out to people all over the country, not just in England, in Wales, in Scotland as well. And I tell you what, we've got Senate elections in 2 years in Wales. They've got PR in Wales. And I tell you what, we're going to win seats. So, Martin, if you fancy standing, get your centres at Swansea, go and move there for a few years and learn a bit of Welsh. And who knows, you could be in the Senate in 2 years.
Well, Lee, my Welsh is worse than my King's English. And on that point, I want to pass you over to Chris Hope. He's got a question for you.
Lee Anson, great to see you. The polling does support what you're saying. We've got this polling from We Think polling showing that Labour's down 6 points since the election, Reform's up 5 points, the Tories becalmed at 20 points. That suggests that support is leaching from Labour towards Reform UK, and that must be a worry, it seems. And how is... you say you're well received in the pub there. When I was covering the Brexit Party campaign that Nigel Farage led in 2019 for European Parliament, he was heckled and booed in Merthyr Tydfil. He was told to go home, we don't need you here, Nigel Farage. Are you sure that's a fair reflection of all people's views of Reform UK?
I think it is, Chopper. I think, you know, politics changes very quickly these days. People are fed up. Look at the last election, for example. Yeah, Labour got a massive landslide, but the actual, you know, the amount of people that voted for Keir Starmer was well down. People are a little bit fed up with politics. Like I said to Martin, they're fed up of voting for one thing and getting another. They've seen now that Reform's got 5 world-class MPs in Westminster. We've got councillors now. Our membership has shot up from 20,000 when I first joined to nearly 80,000. People are joining every single day. Donors are coming on board. You know, my general election campaign was fantastic. I got people coming out of the woodwork I'd never heard of, wanting to help, deliver leaflets, put posters up. There is something happening out there. I know Nigel says this a lot, but people are genuinely fed up with the 2 mainstream parties, Chopper, and Reform UK offers a glimmer of hope.
OK, Lee, now we've got Councillor David Thomas on the show at 5 o'clock. He's the leader of the Reform Welsh 3. But before that, something else you've done today. You sent a rather angry letter, shall we say, to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. You're talking about those who've been arrested, and you're coming out with some pretty spicy words about their presumption, you think, of guilt, not innocence. Tell us more.
Well, you know, in this, we pride ourselves in this country, Martin, on being innocent until proven guilty. Now, the Home Office put this tweet out which said criminals. So they're sort of assuming the 1,000 people that's been arrested are already criminals, which is why I sent this letter to Yvette Cooper. Now, bear in mind, this Twitter platform, X platform, if you like, this is the Home Office. This is not some angry politician at 11:30 at night who's probably been on the bottle and decided to tweet something out and then regretted it the day after. This is the Home Office, and I think it's an absolute scandal.
You said here, innocent until proven guilty. That tweet's on the screen now. It appears not since the Labour Party took charge. Check this tweet out from the Home Office sent out last week, which in my opinion is disgraceful. Now, they also sent a letter. I think we've got a picture of that we can pop on the screen, Lee. And you've said here in that letter, you think this could be a possible contempt of court issue. Strong words, Lee. Tell us more.
Well, you know this, Martin. You know, if you talk about a live court case and, make statements on social media, even when we're sat in the House of Commons, if we accidentally mention a current court case, we get slapped down by the Speaker. We can't influence the outcome of any sort of trial. And for the Home Office to say these 1,000 people are criminals, now, it might be the case that most of them are get convicted and face the full wrath of the law. And so be it. But you cannot prejudge that. You cannot say these people are automatically criminals. Where have they got this information from? And to what end, Martin?
Lee, we've seen very touching pictures today of the King in Southport, calming the community there after what we saw with the triple killing and also the riots. We were contacted by a very passionate viewer called June, Lee, and she was saying what needs to happen now is that communities across Britain where those riots took place need to be listened to by the political class, need to be listened to by the Prime Minister. Lee Anderson, we saw that in 2011 in the wake of the Tottenham riots. Do you think that needs to happen now? And do you think it will happen? Do you think Sir Keir Starmer will listen to the British public about why those riots took place?
Well, I came on GB News, I think it's 3 weeks ago when the riots were happening, Martin. I said exactly this. It's all right locking people up and banging them in prison and putting them through the judiciary system, quite sharpish. But at the end of the day, you have to sit down and speak to these people. And I made a play on GB News to Sir Keir Starmer that these lads, these youths, whatever, who they keep labelling as far right, get them in a room. Go on, Sir Keir, get them in a room and go and talk to them and ask them why they're so angry. And then you might get to the nub of the problem, and then you might start coming up with some solutions. Because just keep locking people up time and time again is not a solution, because this problem will fester away and it'll keep rearing its ugly head every 2 or 3 years.
OK, Lee Anderson, thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your forthright opinions. And also thank you, Chris Hope, for joining me in the studio. There's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including legalised shooting up centres, sensible practice or a pathway to addiction and death. We'll be debating that next.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Controversy howls around a proposal to transform an area of Nuremberg's half-built Nazi Congress Hall into a new opera house. Proponents argue that repurposing the site for cultural use could help to reclaim the space, while opponents believe that it risks glorifying Adolf Hitler. The issue reflects broader tensions in Germany over how to handle the archaeology and architecture of Nazism. To discuss this, I'm joined now by the Telegraph's chief opera critic and the former director of the BBC Proms, Sir Nicholas Kenyon. Lovely to see you back on GB News. As I understand it, they want to put a smallish opera house, I think about 800 seats, within the horseshoe shape. So you would have to walk through, as it were, this historical Nazi territory to get into the opera house. What do you think?
Well, the first thing to say, Michael, is that Nuremberg is such an important centre of German history. And so this site is going to be especially contested. You know, we've had the Nuremberg rallies after the war. We had the Nuremberg trials. Its history goes back centuries. I went there, but I went there to visit the birthplace of Albrecht Dürer. And, of course, as you would know, Wagner's Master Singers of Nuremberg is set there. So I think you've got so many things jostling. I feel absolutely certain in myself that buildings need to move on. they need to be repurposed, they need to be reinvented. But it's not for me to say what weight of tradition would fall on those people going in to a new building in the knowledge of what it used to be.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:47. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Scotland has the highest rate of drug deaths in Europe as new data shows it increased by 12% last year. And those in the country's most deprived areas are an astonishing 15 times more likely to die of drug misuse last year than those in the least deprived areas. An astonishing statistic. So how do we attempt to solve this crisis? Well, there are plans to open the UK's first safe drug consumption facility in Glasgow this September. But legalising shooting up, is that not just encouraging people to become addicts in the first place? Well, joining me to discuss this is the consultant neurologist and the medical cannabis expert, Mike Barnes. And I'm also delighted to say I'm joined by the former Conservative MP, Marco Longhi. Let's start with you, if we could, Mike. Mike, we have tragic loss of life in Scotland and it's on the increase, but is it really the answer to make it easier to take drugs? We've seen similar schemes rolled out in places like Portland, Oregon and in Canada. And what happened there is that when you legalise something in one area, people from all over America moved in and drug deaths went up, not down. Tell me why this might work in Scotland.
Well, of course, it's not the whole solution to the drug crisis. That's very clear. But it is a step in the right direction, I think. I mean, a drug consumption centre like this, first of all, reduces harm. And that's, I think, what the primary reason is, to help people, often with significant physical and mental health issues, to come to terms, to adapt to their drug habit, most of which is not their fault. It reduces drug deaths. Now, it's not going to cure drug deaths, but it will reduce drug deaths. And the evidence from around the world, and you're quite right, it's been introduced in many countries, Australia, Canada, Germany, France. And the general experience in those countries is that it, A, reduces harm, B, reduces drug deaths, and C, opens the opportunities for the people to have treatment and help for their addiction. It also helps the local communities because you don't get people taking drugs in the streets, leaving needles around and such like. So, you know, there's a lot of benefits. It's not the whole solution, but it is a step, in my opinion, in the right direction.
Marco Longhi is shaking your head. Over to you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the public health guest that you have there, because I know he means well, and I know he does probably a very lot of good work in what he does. But his priority, as you have just heard, is on the immediate health and safety of individuals rather than the wider moral, legal or practical considerations. Think about the perceived endorsement of drug use that this is giving, as you mentioned, Martin. It says completely the wrong message, especially to younger people, implying that drug use could be either acceptable or even inevitable. Think about the legal and ethical concerns this brings about. You know, there's a legal dilemma here where we're using public funds in a way that might actually conflict with the enforcement of drug laws that we have right now. So is it legal or is it illegal? Or is it legal just in some places rather than others? Because it is illegal to take these drugs wherever you are. We're making an exemption for these places. What about actually addressing the root causes instead? Shouldn't we be putting resources into prevention and rehabilitation programs rather than providing a place to use even more drugs safely? What about, you know, the consultant mentioned community before, and, you know, perhaps needles being about. What about, you know, this could be a magnet for a lot more drug users coming into a concentrated area, I don't think the local communities would be very happy with this. So you could potentially see more drug-related activities in an area, drug dealing, loitering, and therefore probably crime. And then probably would mean that this is, these areas are probably less desirable to live in. So people won't be very happy. There's a question around the long-term benefits. There's definitely insufficient data. And you've mentioned what's happened in the United States, Martin. What are the long-term positive outcomes for all of this? What about reduced drug use or improved public health overall? I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever. And I think that's even been acknowledged today.
Okay,
and as you said, Martin,
let's let Marco, when he said Mike, get a word in. Mike, it's fair to say the war on drugs hasn't been won. We perhaps can never win it. So locking people up and criminalise them doesn't seem to be working. But is the state-sanctioned consumption of opiates, perhaps even on public money, on the public ticket, is that really the answer?
Well, I say it's not the whole answer at all, and I totally agree that we need more money into the health support and addiction services. Of that, there's no doubt. But my view, again, is that these centres help the people that need the help. There's no evidence across the globe that this will increase drug consumption, that it doesn't go down either, but it doesn't go up. So we're not causing more people to become addicts, and we're helping those that are. So, yeah, it's a small step, but it's a small step in the right direction. It's safe, and it reduces deaths. There's no doubt about that. There's over 1,000 deaths a year in Scotland. That will come down. If it comes down one death, it's worth doing, but it will probably come down several hundred. In the UK, there's 162,000 prosecutions in 2020 for drug possession, each one taking about 10 hours of police time. That's a massive police time waste, frankly. 10,000 people were incarcerated in prison as a result of simple drug possession. I'm not talking about drug supply here, or drug dealing, drug possession. Surely the saving of that money is worth investing in the health of the addicts.
OK, we have to leave it there, gentlemen. A superb debate. Thank you for your opinions. Both sides of the debate. That's what we like here on GB News. Thank you, Mike Barnes, and also Marco Longhi. Now, how could a luxury super yacht simply sink while moored off the coast after withstanding the choppiest of seas as it crossed the Atlantic? We'll have much more from the scene off the coast of Sicily after this. Plus, we'll talk to the new Reform councillor in Wales. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now's your weather with Alex Burkill.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some very wet and windy weather across the northwest tomorrow, but for the time being, we still have a blustery, showery theme across much of the country because of an area of low pressure just to the northwest of us, driving a fairly brisk westerly flow. And it's on this flow we're going to continue to see hefty showers, particularly to the northwest of the UK as we go through this evening and the start of the night. Elsewhere, many showers dying out, and a lot of the showers will ease with clear skies developing, and under those clear skies it is going to turn a bit cooler than it has done through some recent nights, especially towards the southeast. Towards the north and west, a bit of clouds starting to push in as we go towards dawn. We are then going to see increasing amounts of cloud coming in from the west as we go through the day, but starting off in the south, it's looking largely bright, just some hazy sunshine and a few showers towards western parts, sunnier and drier further east. Cloud then building across Northern Ireland through the morning and western parts of Scotland, and here it will quite quickly start to turn pretty wet as a weather system makes its way in. A drier picture though for eastern parts of Scotland as we go into the morning. That wet weather then will spill across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later into parts of northwestern England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. The heaviest rain will be across western parts of Scotland, where totals could reach 100 to 150 millimetres as we go into Thursday as well. So some disruption quite likely with a warning in force. Something a bit warmer and drier towards the southeast here, temperatures getting into the low 20s. More wet weather to come as we go through the evening and overnight, particularly across Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. A drier story further south. So it is looking wet for many of us for a time on Thursday as that system progresses its way further southeast, and then more rain to come on Friday. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. We're seeing slow traffic in Perth and Kinross on the M19 northbound at Junction 12, the Broxton roundabout. Slow for the M8 eastbound in Edinburgh at Junction 1, Hermiston Gate. We're seeing stop-start traffic on the M6 northbound in Merseyside just before Junction 23 for Haydock. Slow for the M1 southbound in Leicestershire just before Junction 21 for the M69. We've got the usual slow traffic in the West Midlands for the M5 northbound to join the M6 at Junction 8. Queuing traffic for the M25 anti-clockwise in Kent at the Dartford tunnels. Estimated travel time there around 15 minutes. 15 minutes is also the estimated travel time for the M25 clockwise in Berkshire up towards Junction 15 for the M4. And we're also seeing slow traffic on the M25 into the roadworks anti-clockwise just before Junction 10, the Wisley interchange.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Stump.
you made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the House of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, as the search for missing British tech tycoon Mike Lynch now enters its second day, we'll be live from the city and coast where investigators are desperately searching for survivors and desperately trying to piece together exactly what's happened to the billionaire's super yacht. And is the Reform Party launching a town hall takeover of councils ahead of the local elections next May? Well, Nigel Farage's party has scooped up 3 independent councillors in Gwent, Wales, and soon I'll be joined by the leader of that council. Before the election, Labour promised we'd save £300 a year on our energy bills. Well, today we're told they'll go up by 150 quid. And they also promised to get Britain working again. Yet today, they want to enshrine the rights to work from home in law. Confused? So am I. Well, we'll try and help you to make sense of it all. And King Charles received a very warm welcome in Southport as he arrived to meet survivors of the attack in which 3 young girls were tragically stabbed to death. Is it time for a queer Sheriff of Nottingham? Well, woke directors at the BBC have made the Sheriff of Nottingham young, female and queer in the new series of Sherwood. Men in Tights we can take. We really need a gay, gender-fluid Sheriff of Nottingham. What's the show? Always a pleasure to have your company. Well, a short while ago, we spoke to Lee Anderson about the Reform Party's manoeuvres taking over 3 independent councillors in Gwent, in Wales. Is this the beginnings of something that's happening nationwide? Well, soon I'll be joined by Councillor David Thomas, who is the head of Reform Wales, to see why he crossed the floor from an independent to Nigel Farage's outfit, what this means for Wales, what it could mean for the rest of the nation. Get in touch usual ways and read your best comments out before the end of the show. You know what to do. It's gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that is your headlines with Mark White.
Good evening. It's 2 minutes past 5. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. Specialist dive teams searching the wreck of a British super yacht off Sicily are making slow progress because of the difficult conditions at the wreck site. The Italian Coast Guard has deployed 5 patrol boats, a helicopter and divers from specialist units in the region. A remotely operated underwater vehicle is also being used by search teams. Among those unaccounted for is British businessman Mike Lynch and his daughter. Morgan Stanley banking chairman Jonathan Bloomer and senior lawyer Chris Morvillo are also missing, along with their wives. 15 people were rescued after the vessel capsized in a heavy storm. Well, Marco Tilota from the Palmero Diving Unit told reporters that dive teams are encountering significant challenges in their attempts to access the wreck.
The difficulties of the case are dictated by the depth that does not allow for long working times. So you understand well that the conditions of the hull are tilted 90 degrees. Access to the hull is difficult. If you manage to get inside the hull, you understand well that inside there is a world of objects. So penetrating inside and descending into the compartment below from the stairs that are narrow and going into all the cabins is a really hard and difficult job.
Well, it's also been confirmed that a British businessman who stood trial in the US alongside missing tycoon Mike Lynch has died after being hit by a car. Stephen Chamberlain was killed while out running in Cambridgeshire on Saturday. Both men had recently been acquitted of fraud in the US federal court relating to the sale of their company to software giant Hewlett-Packard for £8.6 billion. King Charles has visited Southport today to meet survivors of last month's stabbing attack in the town, which left 3 girls dead and others injured. His Majesty also took time to meet members of the public who showed up for the visit. Earlier, he spoke to some of those who provided support in the aftermath of the attack. And he also thanked emergency service personnel who dealt with both the stabbings and the riots that followed. At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an airstrike on a school in Gaza. Israel claims Hamas was using the school as a command centre. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who were captured in the 7th of October attacks. It comes as the US, Egypt, Qatar are calling on Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposal after it gained the backing of Israel last night. Joe Biden became emotional as he delivered what's widely believed to be his farewell speech to the Democratic National Convention. The US president wiped away tears as he addressed crowds on the first day of the event in Chicago. Kamala Harris will be formally declared as the party's election candidate later this week. Mr. Biden says she's the right choice for America.
Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
Well, intelligence officials say Iran was behind a hack on Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It follows allegations Tehran tried to infiltrate personal email accounts of around a dozen people linked to the former and current president. The FBI and other federal agencies say the operation was designed to stoke discord and undermine confidence in democracy. A court has heard how a group of migrants were banging and screaming for help, concealed in a refrigerated van, as they were slowly starved of oxygen. Anas al-Mustafa is on trial for allegedly smuggling 7 people from France to the UK on board a ferry. They were hidden in a cramped fake compartment. Crew members on the ship used an axe to free the migrants after hearing their pleas for help. 2 of them lost consciousness before being rescued. Al-Mustafa has denied the charges and the trial continues at Lewes Crown Court. The final 31 Ted Baker stores are expected to close by the end of today after the company behind the fashion chain collapsed back in March. More than 500 jobs are at risk. They include locations at Heathrow and Gatwick airports, London's Regent Street, Bath, York and Portsmouth. Well, there you go. You're right up to date. More for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Mark. Now, this hour, divers have entered the sunken super yacht as the hunt continues for the missing passengers. British tech tycoon Mike Lynch and his daughter are among 6 tourists still missing after that luxury yacht sank in a tornado off the coast of Sicily in the early hours of yesterday morning. And GB News reporter Adam Cherry is on the scene there off the coast of Sicily. Adam, the search continues. The hours are vanishing away now. The chances, it seems, of a successful rescue are vanishing or diminishing. What's the latest from the scene?
Well, Martin, I'm actually walking along the pier area where, of course, the yacht was docked up until yesterday morning. And I think for those watching on television, it reminds you that actually this is, of course, a bustling boating area, yachting area. But it's so abnormal for something like this to happen, and it's such appalling and cruel misfortune that it has. As you say, police. So the police are still here. You might be able, you've just heard their whistle behind me, and there is a gathering presence. People are now lingering here to observe what's going on, and there are still at least 3 boats in the water. About every half an hour to maybe 45 minutes, you'll see their search helicopter, which was initially parked virtually right up next to me when I was speaking to you earlier during the show. That now flies around this area frequently, as I say, every 30 to 45 minutes. So there is some argument that the next 40 hours, or perhaps 24 hours, are absolutely crucial because although, of course, the ship sank quickly and there is some feeling that perhaps time has already run out, unfortunately, other engineers argue that given the size of the vessel, there may be air pockets within the hull which are capable of sustaining life for at least another day or so. So although we are 38 hours into this rescue operation and 15 people have been found alive already, there is still some hope, and this is a very crucial stage, Martin.
Adam, we spoke to Dr. Simon Box earlier in the show. He's an oceanographer, University of Southampton, huge expertise of these search and rescue diving missions. He said one of the particular difficulties about the recovery mission, the rescue mission on this vessel, is that the only way to attempt to get to anybody who may still be alive is to go in through the hatches, which makes it very precarious, very dangerous, very laborious and slow. And as a consequence, Adam Cherry, there's a very short window of opportunity for divers once they get in and get down and descend with their air availability and also decompression issues because they're at 50 metres depth. So the window of opportunity to search search, Adam Cherry, is actually quite limited, even though relatively 50 metres isn't a hugely deep area of water.
Yeah, and also it's not particularly far off the coast, which makes the whole thing, I suppose, in a sense, even more tragic. They're so close to home. You're right. It is difficult, and also they're only able to dive for 12 minutes at a time before they have to resurface. And one of the divers, or rather a spokesman for one of the divers, said recently that they can't see anything inside the ship, and the fact that the ship is intact, the hull is intact, also makes this difficult. We're expecting them, if there are any of the 6 still alive, they would be in their cabins given the time that this sinking took place. That's where they're looking, but it's very difficult with the debris, and as you say, it's tricky for them to enter or even see anything at this point.
Okay, Adam Cherry, thank you for joining us there from that marina there in Sicily, where that boat would have been docked before as the search and rescue mission continues. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, 3 councillors have joined Reform UK and become the party's first elected politicians in Wales. Now, just a few councillors defecting might seem hardly revolutionary, but is this a sign that Nigel Farage and his party are serious about targeting Labour's heartlands? Well, let's now hear from one of those councillors who defected to Reform just yesterday. That's Councillor David Thomas, who is now the leader of Reform UK Wales. Councillor Thomas, welcome to the show. So you were elected successfully and have been representing your local community for years now. In fact, you're a Labour councillor before Brexit. Why would you have defected to the Reform Party? Tell us the reasons behind your decision.
Well, basically, Martin, after we left Labour and went independent, we were politically homeless for a long time, and we feel that Reform UK, offers common sense policies, fiscal responsibility, and putting local communities first, which perfectly aligns to our vision of effective governance.
Is it fair to say, in the past, I know the Brexit Party got a couple of MEPs away in 2019, but at general elections, local elections, the Brexit Party Reform has never won anything. Would you have been better off staying as an independent?
Well, that's an argument that we could go down, but no, I don't think so at all. Because when you talk to the local community, especially all around Southport, not just my area of Llantarnam where I represent, people have had enough of Labour. Nothing changes. Everything's getting worse. Nothing gets better. I mean, they've been in power for like 25 years, and everything they touch turns to mush. I mean, just look at Cardiff Airport, for example. Cardiff Airport, they've had that since 2019. They've spent 179 million quid on it. I mean, it's still not successful. You can't keep chucking money away. But it's always the same case with them. It's not their money. So what does it matter? They want 36 new politicians at a cost of 18 million quid. Again, it's not their money. There's no real thought going into what the people want.
OK, David, I'm joined in the studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. He's also got a question for you.
Hi, David. Chris Hope in the studio with Martin. You've said there why people are moving away from Labour, but why are they going towards Reform? Why are you going to Reform UK? When I've been there with Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, back in 2019 and the Brexit Party was campaigning, he was told in Merthyr Tydfil to go home, you're not wanted here. I mean, is he liked, Nigel Farage, in Wales, or is he a drag anchor on the development of Reform UK?
It depends who was there in Merthyr, really, and who were they really the people of Merthyr Town. I'm not so sure they were. I was there myself, and I'm not too sure their accents matched my accent in Merthyr. So I'm not so sure they were actually true people of Merthyr Town. But yeah, I mean, Nigel Farage is offering something completely different. It's all common sense policies, and the Tories have never done well in Wales, never done well in Wales at all. So this is a credible alternative to having to blindly vote for a party that no longer represents the true interests of the people of Wales.
OK, David, there are 3 of you now, the Reform Welsh 3. What's the plan? What do you want to do next? What's your ambition?
Well, hopefully we'll continue the momentum that we've already started. We've had so much support for what we've done. It's overwhelming support, and we've had messages from other councillors in other councils that have said to us, "Look, we've seen what you've done. It's really exciting. We're thinking about doing it ourselves." But somebody has to make the move first. We've done it, and hopefully now others will follow.
OK, well, thanks for joining us. Very best of British to you, David. Councillor David Thomas, the new leader of Reform Wales. Pleasure to have you on the show. So, Chris, what do you make of that? I mean, I know that you were on the campaign trail in 2019 in Wales. A couple of MEPs did get away from Reform. Do you think this has any chance of getting a toehold in the wider capacity? Is the political wind in the sails for change? 5 MPs, is a good start, but it's a tiny amount. Can this, in Wales, be the start of a broader takeover, do you feel?
Well, it could be. I'm not convinced, but it could be. I mean, looking at the national polls, since the election, Labour's dropped 6 points, according to We Think polling. Reform have gained 5 points. That suggests that people who backed Labour at the election, they're going towards Reform UK. Nigel Farage, wherever he is this week and next week, will be looking at that going, well, there's a chance here. He's on a 5-year journey, he thinks, to try and beat the Tories in 2028, 2029 general election. Again, I think it's highly ambitious. But, you heard that from David Thomas. He says why people are annoyed with Labour as the legacy government for nearly well over 2 decades in Labour. But whether Reform UK is the answer, I think I'm not convinced yet.
It's worth pointing out that in Torfan Borough Council in Gwent, where this movement has happened, 29 of 40 of the council seats are Labour Party.
The numbers are stacked against David Thomas and his friends there at Reform UK. It's an opportunity, and the polls suggest there's movement from Labour-type people, because they're all former Labour councillors, towards Reform UK. But this is absolutely the very, very small beginnings here. But everyone starts somewhere, and behind the scenes, Reform UK nationally are preparing for next May's local elections in England. They want to try and bed down councillors. When you get councillors embedded in an area, just like with Lib Dems, it's like some cockroaches. They're very hard to get rid of.
And also, you know where your vote is.
Not saying like cockroaches. I mean, like they're hard to get rid of.
I understood what you meant. There'll be no hate crime on my show. What I think is interesting is this is long, it's painstaking, it's not particularly sexy to build that ground game with councils, to know where your votes are. But it is an essential part for you to have any chance of winning in 5 years' time. You have to do this legwork now. Maybe that's the game plan. Maybe we might see something else outside of Wales.
That is the game plan. I should have said tentacles, not cockroaches, but you know what I mean. The point is...
Stop apologising. We know what you meant.
It's very hard to get rid of councillors when they can bed in and know where voters live, and that's what you may get with Reform UK. This is the kind of thing that people who want Reform UK to do well want to see more of.
OK, now, very quickly, you are hosting GB News tonight.
That's right.
And that is 7 till 8 p.m. tonight. What's on your menu?
We've been looking closely at Labour's mass prison release coming on the 10th of September. 2,000 prisoners released early, serving 40% of their time, looking at who might be released, and it's alarming. I do advise people to tune in. We're also looking at Labour's plan to try and mitigate removal of the winter fuel allowance to those on a pension credit. But even so, that is very controversial, with bills set to rise in October. And also we'll be hearing from Bill Rammell, Michael Brown, former Labour, former Tory MP, and also asking questions you've been asking: can buildings be racist? I'm not sure GB News viewers agree.
Super. So that's GB News tonight with Chris. That's 7 till 8 right here on GB News in the studio. Thank you very much. Superb. Now, coming up, we'll go to our man in America for the latest on the presidential race on Bonfire Night, November the 5th. We'll see fireworks. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is a big old headache because we talk a lot about GP appointments, don't we? But it's certainly
almost everyone I know struggles to see a dentist when they need one.
Yes. You know the best time to go to a dentist? When? 2:30. 2:30.
That's actually quite good. It's better than my gags.
The guy that went into Goa, to India, to get his dental treatment, is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, so tell us about that. This is how desperate people are to get treatment now. So what's the story?
OK, the story is a guy couldn't get an appointment at the NHS, so he went all the way to Goa in India to get his dental appointment. Now, I think he probably just wanted to go on holiday, and he thought, I know, why don't I go on holiday to Goa and then get my teeth done? Look, people are travelling in their droves. There's whole aeroplanes full of people with medical tourists. Like in Turkey, you get a whole aeroplane with people with hair implants, things like that. Well,
so, yeah. I was going to go to
turkey teeth, isn't it?
Turkey teeth.
Turkey teeth. Well, now
that's when they strip the tooth down and you have these little pegs.
Yes, they strip them down. But in many cases, they strip them down far too low, so the nerve is exposed and it gets infected, and it's exposed to the elements. So you get infection in the tooth, and then you have to essentially take them all off. But by then, the infection spreads so far. I was getting my nails done the other day, which I don't do very often, and my nail technician said to me, "Is your dad still a dentist?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Please, can I have an emergency appointment?" I went to Turkey and I got my teeth done, and now they look incredible, but I'm in so much pain. They're all infected. She had 15 taken out from the top and 12 from the bottom, and it's an absolute disaster. But this is what people are feeling like they have to do.
So medical tourism doesn't always work.
No, but it shows, Alex, that people can't get their teeth sorted here, so they go elsewhere. Listen, do you floss, by the way?
Don't floss. GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:24. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Democratic National Convention has kicked off in Chicago. Vice President Kamala Harris surprised crowds with an earlier-than-expected appearance as she thanked President Joe Biden for his leadership.
I want to kick us off by celebrating our incredible President Joe Biden, who will be speaking later tonight. Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you.
Well, last night, Joe Biden cried and called Donald Trump a loser. And tonight, we're expecting Michelle and Barack Obama to make an appearance and anoint Kamala Harris. Let's cross over now live to Washington, D.C. and speak to our US correspondent, Steve Edgington. Steve, welcome to the show. So very, lots of vibes of 2016. We've got the Obamas, we've got the Clinton dynasty out to make sure the baton is passed. But a lot of people are saying, Steve, that there wasn't an elected vote. There wasn't a Democratic vote. Kamala Harris has been coronated. She's been anointed, not elected. Nevertheless, what do you think we're going to expect tonight?
You're right. They're getting their big hitters out to endorse Kamala Harris. They're trying to shape the narrative around their new nominee for the president. Of course, Kamala Harris was the vice president for the last 4 years, but she wasn't particularly well known or well liked by Americans. If you looked at opinion polls, she is one of the most unpopular vice presidents America has ever had. So the Democrats really had an opportunity and a task on their hands to try and reshape what Americans thought of Kamala Harris. And they're using all of these very popular former presidents, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, who'll be speaking tonight at the Democratic Convention, to try and persuade Americans that actually Kamala Harris is a strong candidate. She's far better. She's younger than Joe Biden. And she's really breathed a new fresh of life into the Democratic campaign. If you look at opinion polls, Kamala Harris is doing much better than many expected her to do. She's had a bit of a bump. And I think they're trying to use this convention, again, to try and reshape the narrative around Harris as a candidate. Previously, she's seen as quite inauthentic. She's not very good at interviews. She hasn't done a media interview in over a month. But when she's on script, she can be fairly charismatic. And her speech on Thursday, accepting the nomination, is expected to be a pretty good speech. She can be quite a good speaker if she's reading off a teleprompter. Now, where she struggles, and perhaps her greatest weakness, is when she's off script, when she's being interviewed by the press, whether they're asking her questions if she's come off Air Force One or at other just different press conferences and so on. She can sort of scramble her words. She comes across as quite inarticulate and inauthentic. So certainly this convention, again, it's all about shaping the Kamala Harris brand ahead of the election in November. It's only a few months away now.
And Steve, the pre-prepared set pieces to a very friendly crowd with former presidents, Democratic Party luminaires around you, that's one thing. But what about a more rigorous cross-examination, a more worthwhile test? And you alluded there to some TV debates. I understand that Kamala Harris has pulled out of a Fox TV debate with Donald Trump, fearing she might not have a very friendly audience. Can she get through to November without facing some severe cross-examination from Donald Trump and indeed the American media and public?
Well, in 2020, the Democrats really had a strategy of keeping Joe Biden in his basement. He didn't really do campaign events. He didn't do too many interviews. And that was because of COVID. That's what they said, at least. Whereas Donald Trump was going out there and trying to do rallies and so on. This time around, I think they're trying to repeat that same strategy. She certainly has avoided the press for a long time. She's agreed to do 2 debates on liberal media networks in the United States. As you say, she is avoiding this debate on September the 4th with Fox News. And it seems the Democrats are quite concerned or worried about hosting a debate or going to a debate on a network which they see as not favorable to them. So I think there have been a lot of accusations, particularly from J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, that she is avoiding scrutiny, she is avoiding the press, that this isn't a democratic way to become elected president. She needs to put herself forward. She needs to start having a bit more pushback against her in the media and so on. And she's simply not doing that. For the Democrats, that's quite a clever strategy, as I said. I think she's a good speaker when she's on script, but when she gets off script, she really struggles. So it makes sense why they're hiding from the media at this time.
Steve, do you think the saddest person in America to see Joe Biden go will be Donald Trump? I mean, he looked nailed on to have beaten Joe Biden. A lot of doubt around his mental wherewithal, his capacity to fight on. And Kamala Harris, as you pointed out, not a perfect opponent, but, as you say, measurably better than Joe Biden.
She's certainly younger, and she seems that she has a lot more energy and charisma than Joe Biden, who's not in his prime, let's be honest. We saw him on that debate stage with Donald Trump, and he really struggled to get some of his answers out. And the American people, I think, or a lot of Americans, were quite shocked at his poor performance. Donald Trump will be upset that he's facing Kamala Harris. We know that his campaign feel a bit frustrated. They don't quite know which attack line to go after her with. So they're having to completely repivot to a new candidate, a different candidate with different weaknesses, but also different strengths to Joe Biden. So I think that the Trump campaign is currently slightly concerned, but they're still ahead in major opinion polls in some of the swing states. I think that many Republicans are confident that they will win in November, with the economy struggling under Biden and Harris. Again, Harris is not a particularly strong candidate when it comes to other people like Barack Obama. She doesn't have the charisma. She is seen as inauthentic. She has struggled in the opinion polls. So there are also weaknesses around Kamala Harris. So I don't think the Trump campaign are too concerned, but certainly more concerned than when they were facing Joe Biden.
OK, Steve Edgington, is going to be the greatest show on earth, November the 5th. And, of course, all eyes on that Chicago conference tonight. We'll have full details on that tomorrow. Steve Edgington, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including, in a moment, I'll speak to Jacob Rees-Mogg from Somerset about the blight of low-traffic neighbourhoods in Bath. But first, here's your latest news headlines, and it's Mark White.
Good evening at 5:31. The latest news from the GB News Centre. And first, some breaking news just reaching us here. Emergency services in Lincolnshire are at the scene of a rescue operation at a pleasure park in Skegness. The incident at the Bottons Pleasure Park in Skegness follows a malfunction of one of the rides. Now, it's reported up to 20 people are believed to be stranded in mid-air as fire service personnel attempt to get them down safely. And we'll bring you more on this as we get it. Specialist dive teams searching the wreck of a British super yacht off Sicily are making slow progress because of the difficult conditions on the wreck site. The Italian Coast Guard has deployed 5 patrol boats, a helicopter and divers from specialist units in the region. A remotely operated underwater vehicle is also being used by search teams. Among those unaccounted for is British businessman Mike Lynch and his daughter. Morgan Stanley banking chairman Jonathan Bloomer and senior lawyer Chris Morvillo are also missing along with their wives. 15 people were rescued after the vessel capsized in a heavy storm. King Charles has visited Southport today to meet survivors of last month's stabbing attack in the town. It left 3 girls dead and others injured. His Majesty also took time to meet members of the public who showed up for the visit. Earlier, he spoke to some of those who provided support in the aftermath of the attack. And he also thanked emergency service personnel who dealt with both the stabbings and the riots that followed. At least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an airstrike on a school in Gaza. Israel claims Hamas was using the school as a command centre. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who were captured on the 7th of October attacks. It comes as the US, Egypt and Qatar are calling on Hamas to agree to a ceasefire proposal after it gained the backing of Israel last night. Joe Biden became emotional as he delivered what's widely seen as his farewell speech to the Democratic National Convention. The US president wiped away tears as he addressed crowds on the first day of the event in Chicago. Kamala Harris will be formally declared as the party's election candidate later this week. Mr. Biden says she's the right choice for America. A court has heard how a group of migrants were banging and screaming for help, concealed in a refrigerated van as they were slowly starved of oxygen. Anas al-Mustafa is on trial for allegedly smuggling 7 people from France to the UK on board a ferry. They were hidden in a cramped, fake compartment. Crew members on the ship used an axe to free the migrants after hearing their pleas for help. 2 of them lost consciousness before being rescued. Al-Mustafa has denied the charges and the trial continues at Lewes Crown Court. OK, you're right up to date. We'll have more for you in half an hour at 6 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Mark. Now, a ton of you have been getting in touch. gbnews.com/your say. This one is superb from Catherine on the debates we had earlier about racist buildings. Yes, they exist. She said, racist buildings. Well done, Martin. What a great counter-argument. We are truly sick of people trying to demean this country when they don't even acknowledge all of the slavery in history by other cultures and the current slave trade, which to my knowledge is mostly non-white people being enslaved by non-white people. Catherine, great point. Now, my favourite part of the show, I'm joined by Michelle Juby, the queen of prime-time political debate. Hove's interview now. Jubes, what's on your menu?
Hello, Martin. Good to join you. Look, there's one story that's dominated so much of the news headlines today. That is the very sad news of a man, Mike Lynch. Many call him British version of Bill Gates. His yacht seems to be caught in some kind of weather freak accident. I can tell you now, joining me on my programme for an exclusive conversation is a man, David Tabasel. He is a friend and actually the co-founder of the business Autonomy, which is something that people will remember that Mike Lynch actually spent over a decade of his life trying to kind of salvage his reputation. He was, of course, cleared of the charges in June this year. So interesting chat there. Horrendous situation unfolding over in Italy. Of course, also want to talk about matters in this country as well. Yvette Cooper doing another review about extremism. I've got to wonder how many reviews of these things do we need anyway this time on the agenda is whether or not misogyny could be classed as extremism, terrorism, if you will. Also, this knife amnesty, Martin. What do we reckon that all these kind of teenagers rocking around with their zombie knives are now going to go up to their local police station, good luck finding one, by the way, and hand over their goods? I mean, really? Is that what we think is going to happen? And this whole notion of having a right to switch off, is that what people need when it comes to work-life balance or not?
Well, Michelle, you often email me about work-related matters early and late at night. I've got no objections to that.
That's a secret.
We're always working, Michelle Dewberry. Don't worry, there'll be no lawsuits from me. Michelle Dewberry, Dubes & Co, 6 till 7, superb show as ever. You'd expect no less. Now, loads more to come before the end of the show, including, do we really need a gender-fluid woman, a queer, to be the Sheriff of Nottingham? The answer's no, and I'm from Nottingham. That's coming soon.
Hi, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some very wet and windy weather across the northwest tomorrow, but for the time being, we still have a blustery, showery theme across much of the country because of an area of low pressure just to the northwest of us, driving a fairly brisk westerly flow. And it's on this flow we're going to continue to see hefty showers, particularly to the northwest of the UK as we go through this evening and the start of the night. Elsewhere, many showers dying out, and a lot of the showers will ease with clear skies developing. And under those clear skies, it is going to turn a bit cooler than it has done through some recent nights, especially towards the southeast, towards the north and west. A bit of clouds starting to push in as we go towards dawn. We are then going to see increasing amounts of cloud coming in from the west as we go through the day. But starting off in the south, it's looking largely bright, just some hazy sunshine and a few showers towards western parts, sunnier and drier further east. Cloud then building across Northern Ireland through the morning and western parts of Scotland, and here it will quite quickly start to turn pretty wet as a weather system makes its way in. A drier picture though for eastern parts of Scotland as we go into the morning. That wet weather then will spill across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and later into parts of northwestern England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. The heaviest rain will be across western parts of Scotland, where totals could reach 100 to 150 millimetres as we go into Thursday as well. So some disruption quite likely with a warning in force. Something a bit warmer and drier towards the southeast here, temperatures getting into the low 20s. More wet weather to come as we go through the evening and overnight, particularly across Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. A drier story further south. So it is looking wet for many of us for a time on Thursday as that system progresses its way further southeast, and then more rain to come on Friday. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Slow for the M18 northbound in Falkirk around junction 7 Hags. It's also slow M8 westbound in West Lothian just before junction 4 Whitburn. Queue in traffic for the M1 southbound in South Yorkshire. 2 lanes closed for a broken down vehicle between junction 33 Catcliffe and 32 the M18 interchange. We're seeing stop-start traffic on the M6 northbound in Merseyside just before junction 23 Haydock. Slow for the A42 northbound in Leicestershire. There's an obstruction in the road between junction 14 Castle Donington and the junction for the East Midlands Airport, and slow in Bedfordshire for the M1 northbound. There's a lane blocked for a broken down vehicle between junction 13 Bedford and 14 for Milton Keynes, and there's also a lane closed on the exit slip road at junction 13. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back, it's 5:41. We're on the final furlong with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Low traffic neighbourhoods might be forced on our beautiful historic city of Bath. LTN see councils close roads to cars and larger vehicles to make them safer for pedestrians and cyclists. But now a local Liberal Democrat councillor is warning residents they won't be consulted on these changes. Now, for more reaction, let's get the thoughts of my GB News presenter colleague and the former Conservative MP for the nearby North East Somerset seat, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. So, Jacob, a lot of people see that the LTNs are a useful way, perhaps, of cutting pollution and traffic. But the key point is, normally, locals are consulted. That hasn't happened in Bath. Tell us more.
Well, also, it's highly disputable that they reduced pollution. They may displace pollution, they may put it in another area. They're also very unfair on elderly people, disabled people, particularly often on people with young children who they need to transport about. It's basically the war on the motorist being led by incompetent Lib Dem councils, and Bath and North East Somerset Council is extraordinarily incompetent, very badly run, inefficient, running to a silly Lib Dem tune. We've just had ridiculous waste of money outside where I live in West Hertfordshire, where they put in traffic calming, but they don't get rid of the potholes. They waste money on these silly schemes without ensuring that the roads have the basic surface that they need. It's all part of the Lib Dems' war on the motorist.
Now, Sir Jacob, it's my understanding that at least 250 people have signed a petition against the LTNs in this area. There's been a very active pressure group, and local businesses don't seem particularly keen on this. But of course, they're being denied by Amanda Rigby. She's the Liberal Democrat member of the council. They've taken the very, very unusual position of not allowing any such consultation. What on earth is going on? That's anti-democratic, and it's not very liberal.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. The Lib Dems are neither liberal nor democratic. They are a dictatorial group in Bath who run Bath and North East Somerset Council for their own benefit, not for the benefit of the residents of the whole area, certainly not for the residents of North East Somerset. And this is part of their loonyism, that they have these schemes that are purely to punish the motorist. It's an extremely bad idea, and as you say, doing it without consultation is deeply authoritarian, and I don't believe they have a mandate for it from voters.
No doubt they would deny, of course, that they are being loonies, and of course anti-democratic. They were elected as councillors. But you're running your show tonight, State of the Nation, of course, 8 to 9 p.m. on GB News, with your magnificent pile there in Somerset. What's on your menu?
What am I going to be talking about? Well, I'm working from home, so I thought it was only suitable to talk about working from home and the government's ridiculous idea that this may actually increase productivity and that presenteeism is bad. Being present for your job is a good thing. The current government wants to pay people more to do less, and it's making public services more expensive for the taxpayer, but also providing less good service. I'm going to be talking about that. And also, as you were talking about, I'm following in your footsteps. Can buildings be racist? And I went to the nearby city of Wells and asked a few people what they thought. Not many people think buildings can be racist.
How can a building be racist if such a thing is possible?
Well, it's the most wonderful nonsense. But again, you've got these strange bodies, left-wing people coming up with potty ideas because they've got nothing better to do. If only councils, parliament, governments got on with the business of running things efficiently rather than faffing around with really silly ideas. I just wonder where you start. Do you think the pyramids built by slave labour should not be visited because of the slavery involved by the Egyptians? It's all balderdash.
Well, I think that's a very different type of racism, because it wasn't white people who were the slave masters, and therefore it gets a free pass. Can I ask you a quick question, Sir Jacob, about, we saw the King earlier on today in Southport, and one of our viewers, June, said what we really need to see now, as well as the King embracing the community, is the Prime Minister to listen to communities across Britain about why some of those riots broke out. We saw that, Sir Jacob, Jacob, after the 2011 riots in Tottenham. Do you think we now need to listen to some of the communities across Britain about their frustrations, or do you think Sir Keir Starmer simply won't do that?
I think the point you make is a very valid one. When riots break out, you need strong policing, you need to stop rioting. But if you think back to 1981 and the riots in Brixton, you then had the Scarman inquiry to try and find out what the causes of the problem were. Once the due process has been followed and the legal penalties have been applied where they're justly deserved, after that's happened, you need to understand why people were doing things. Was there a cause, or was it just thuggery, which is perfectly possible? But I think you're right. I think we need to look at what are the simmering tensions in British society.
Thank you very much, of course. And that's State of the Nation, Jacob Rees-Mogg, 8 till 9 p.m. Thanks for joining us. Now, back to that story about LTNs. The councillor, Mandy Rigby, a Liberal Democrat member of Bath and North East Somerset Council, has given us this statement. All livable neighbourhood areas in Bath were proposed by the communities themselves, and the measures that we will trial or already are being trialled are the result of significant consultation and co-design we started in autumn 2020. Our intention is to continue to deliver livable neighbourhoods, inviting feedback and trialling measures where appropriate. Now, coming up, Robin Hood is the latest to get the woke treatment. Find out how next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Bad news for Liberal mothers who want to score virtue points by transitioning their kids, Lewis.
You know, this
tell us what it is.
Is a California dad is granted full custody of 4-year-old son after boy's mom tried to raise the child non-binary.
It's almost like cult-like behaviour. You've got the mother transitioning and then the transitioning the son as well. It's interesting that, you know, it's almost like a religion. You get, you know, if you're a Christian, your kids are probably going to be Christian. If you're, you know, Hindu, your kids are probably going to be Hindu. And if you're transgender, your kids are probably going to be transgender.
There's absolutely a causation there. We see plenty of times in videos. This is exactly it. And also we see the children of celebrities and people in particularly sort of liberal environments. It doesn't happen in some village in Indonesia or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so there's no such thing as a trans child. There's no such thing as non-binary. What there is are people with mental health issues and parents who want a virtual signal and also want to brainwash their children. This is an egregious example of that, where she was basically taking him to Disneyland, but he couldn't get on a ride unless he wore princess shoes. I mean, really evil, horrible stuff. You know, forced to wear a dress on his birthday. Just really nasty stuff. Now, here's the thing. You talk about the court going to him. No, that's not what happened. He took 800 pages of documentary evidence. He took 8 hours of police body camera footage showing this mental behaviour from the mother. And guess what? The courts ruled that the mum got him. They ruled against him. The only reason that he got custody of his child is because, thank God, a child protective services officer randomly got involved, looked into it themselves, and that's how he eventually got custody of the child. So the courts in America are utterly captured.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:50. We're on the final furlong with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, woke directors of the BBC have made the Sheriff of Nottingham young, female and queer in the new series of Sherwood. Men in tights we can take, but do we really need a gay, gender-fluid Sheriff of Nottingham? Well, joining us now to discuss this is the LGBT activist Peter Tatchell. Peter, you got your Robin Hood coloured shirt on there. Beautiful to see you. I mean, look, I'm all for Men in Tights. We know it's a drama. We know probably Robin Hood didn't exist, and I say that as a citizen of Nottingham. But do we really need to have this wokery interrupting this wonderful story? Do we really need a gender-fluid female Sheriff of Nottingham?
Well, contrary to the way it's been portrayed, this new series of Sherwood is nothing about Robin Hood at all. This is set in contemporary Nottingham, and the new sheriff is leading the fight against a new coal mine, which will bring jobs and prosperity, but has divided the local community because of the bitter memories and tensions over the miners' strike. So it's a contemporary drama, nothing to do with Robin Hood whatsoever.
Which makes it even more puzzling. I mean, the Sheriff of Nottingham, by the way, is a real thing. There is a contemporary, there is a present-day Sheriff of Nottingham, not the fictional character, but there is an actual Sheriff of Nottingham. But to make out that we need an LGBTQ activist to come in and save the coal mining community. I'm from a coal mining community, Peter Tatchell. This is nonsense.
Well, of course, in lots of roles today, we have women and lesbians. There are lesbian, or have been lesbian chief constables. There have been women police and crime commissioners. And indeed, the post of sheriff, which does exist, as you say, is not limited to men. So it's fair enough and okay to have a range of different diverse characters. And this is just one sheriff. It's not not all the sheriffs around the country are being turned into young female lesbians.
Maybe the sheriff, it's got the she in it. We need a Mr. Sheriff. But seriously, this is the kind of thing that just kind of makes people roll their eyes and switch off, doesn't it?
Well, I think, as I say, the way it's been hyped up in some of the press gives the false impression. As I said, it's nothing to do with the Robin Hood story whatsoever. It's the new BBC series Sherwood, which happens to be set in Nottingham and does use the actual real-life role of sheriff to portray the struggle within the community over this proposed new coal mine. So I think it's good to have diversity. But of course, if you look across the country, most sheriffs are male, and that's fine. But let's have a bit of change. Let's have a bit of diversity. Let's shake it up a bit. I think it's fun to play around with characters and to have a different range of characters because that reflects the diversity of our society. And, I'm all for that. Live and let live,
Beautiful. Peter Tatchell, always an absolute delight to have on the show. Thank you very much. And I do like your Robin Hood coloured shirt there. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Always a joy. Now, that's all from me. We've got Jubes & Co. up next, of course. Now, she's got an excellent guest. She's got the co-founder of Autonomy, the Mike Lynch software company, giving some expert and much-needed insight into that story. That's a superb guest. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Now, don't forget, we've got Chris Hope also doing the 7 till 8 shift. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, your weather, here's Alex Burkill.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There will be some very wet and windy weather across the northwest tomorrow, but for the time being, we still have a blustery, showery theme across much of the country.